crowd, quite a crew ready to come through here. So what we're going to do is say the pledge, have our pet of the week with Ms. Stenick, and then bring the kids on in. All right, so if I could ask everybody to stand. Okay, we're here. And if I could ask Mr. Lombardo, in honor of the sports theme this week, to lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, with that as a start.
You're correct.
Thank you.
Well,
I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Stenick and let her take on with a pet of the week.
Okay, we've got Snoopy, who's an elderly Cocker Spaniel, and she'd be perfect for somebody who likes a nice calm dog, perhaps home, needs a companion. She's friendly, and she spent the night with one of my friends over the weekend when the hurricane happened, because we had to take the dogs out of the pound, and she was very good. So anybody who's looking for an elderly, purebred Cocker Spaniel, Snoopy could be for you. Anything else? One Rod Highway.
211 One Rod Highway.
Phone number?
254-4857, and I think Snoopy will probably be had for $5.
$5.
$5.
That's this week's special.
That's this week's special. She's a senior.
What's that per pound?
About a dime, I think.
Just a great value, folks, just a great value. All right.
Okay,
Thank you very much. There's some potential owners waiting just outside.
Come on, Snoop.
All right, next item on the agenda. We've got some special guests here.
Come on, Snoop.
We've had quite a run of success in our local youth sports teams over the last few years, and we're about to recognize our championship girls softball team who made it all the way to New England champs. This is the furthest any girls softball team has made it, so we're thrilled to honor them. And I think they'll be coming in just a minute. It's hard to tell from the noise. This is our first player. You look older than 12.
I definitely am older than 12, but not much.
Girls softball. But Jim, we just got started. We're recognizing the girls softball team. Welcome, ladies. We have some special recognition for you all. I have some certificates here on behalf of the town hall to recognize the great job you did, how proud you made us by making us New England champs. How many guys here were New England champs? All right, great. Everybody? Everybody. All right, just checking. All right. We've got certificates for each one of you, and I'm going to hand those out right now. Madison?
Here.
Here we are. All right. There's yours.
Thank you.
Sarah? Sarah? Congratulations.
Thank you.
There you go. Eliza Elliott. Mary Rose Finnegan. Emma Houghton. Gabriella Natoli. There you go. Alice Nelson. Anna Rasmussen. Anna, you can smile. Brittany Romero. Aaron Rosengren. Julia Wilson. Casey Elliott. There you go. Ed Finnegan. Congratulations, Coach. Dave McCartney. Any truth to the rumor you're Paul's brother? No. Okay, just check. Thank you. Jerry Rasmussen. And Doug Romero. Ladies, we'd like you to look into the camera, smile, and wave to all the folks in Fairfield. The whole town's watching you today. All right? Let's wave. All right. Would one of the coaches care to say anything?
We'd just like to thank you very much for the support of the town, the organization, the ball fields and everything, on behalf of the girls' Little League. Thank you.
All right. Congratulations again. Here you go, ladies. Thank you again.
Good job.
Let's see. We have the boys Little League 11-year-old state champions of Connecticut, and they'll be in here in just a moment.
Yeah, so many people. At least a lot of them. They're all in here. I know.
What if you're having one too?
I'm still having one, yeah.
This is the fan club entering first. All the fans could grab a seat. Yep. No reserve seating. First come, first serve. Kind of like the bleachers.
Can I stand here or is it out of the way?
Kids are going to be over here.
Oh, all right.
Patty, you missed the dog.
No, I already saw the dog. I
Okay.
came first, but
Just
now I'm
check.
going to see Will Lucas. So.
All right.
Oh, good.
Hey, Mike, good to see you. All right. So just remind you, we got the cameras are sitting over there. So if we get still.
You guys can't stand it. That's where the boys are.
All right, coaches, you ready to go? All right, just again, want to recognize by the town of Fairfield the members of the 2011 American Little League 11-year-old state championship team. Starting with Maddie Corkin. Henrik DeYoung. Michael Giazzori. Good job. Oh, thank you. Danny Kiernan. Pat Kubel. Will Lucas. June McAvee. Long family tradition. All right. Ryan Murray. Chris Myers. Good job. Biagio Paletta. Patrick Steed. John Lucas. Phil Murray. TJ Paletta. Congratulations, team. Coaches, would you guys care to say a few words?
Blazer, thanks for coming. We're going to go to the shack after. Thanks for coming, and we're going to keep continuing to work hard and hopefully have some continued success.
All right, congrats on a great season, guys. last team we're going to recognize today is the 2011 Fairfield American Little League 12-year-old state championship team. Hi. Fan club in the seats.
I'm starting to feel better now.
All fans in the seats.
Moving this way.
Hi there. Here you go.
Hi, guys. The fans will please take a seat. Quite the fan club here. Please grab a seat, folks. Hey, friend.
Hey.
Yes, please. Last but not least. Boys are coming in right behind us. Yeah, we have the banners. Boys, come on right in here. Line up right in here.
2 rows, lads. You want 2 rows, Jerry?
Yeah, that's fine. Just
Kind of
Two
face
rows,
the
guys.
camera
just so
that
the
way.
camera can see it.
2 rows
Guys,
for the
You
camera.
guys are used
Look
to
at
being
the
on
cameras that way.
Cameras over there.
Okay, that's 7 rows. 2 rows. There we
All
go.
Fairfield
It's
requirements.
in the front.
Now we're at 3 rows. 2 rows, lads. Right, keep going up a little. Up a little, up a little. There we go. There we go. Left Johnny. Left Johnny. There we go. Graham, right there. There we go.
All right, there it is. All right, guys. First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
You made the town of Fairfield proud. We'd like to recognize your team effort by giving each of you a certificate from the town of Fairfield. And starting with Phil Gladys.
Thank you.
Connor Lynch. Wow, this one I got. Reed? All right, Reed. There you go. Brendan Flynn. Sean Gutierrez. Down we go. Connor Devaney. John Anuzzi. There you go. Eddie Schwartz. Brendan Bucher. All right. Brendan, congratulations. Grant Carnamar. Jack Oracoli. Jack. Brendan. Hendon Lane. Brendan, congratulations. Aiden Kuzic, all right? Aiden, congratulations. Marty Devaney, coach. Kevin Flynn. Stephen Cudsey. And Brandon Lynn. Coach, would anybody like to say a word or anything?
Mr. Linville.
2 state championships. Took me 48 years to win my first one. 2 years to win 2. You guys should be very proud of yourselves. Not many guys, a lot of people in this hall that know what you're feeling like. Not very many people in the country that know what you're feeling like. Congratulations. Be proud of yourselves.
Guys, thank you for making us all proud. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, boys, make sure you go up there. Say thank you.
I'll take that. You guys shake hands on the way out.
Good job, guys. Congratulations. Good job. Good job. Congratulations. Good job. Good job. Good job. Way to go. Exactly. Congratulations. Great job. Good job, Coach.
I gotta make sure I'm in the minutes, not the police.
Way to go. Stay out of that.
Thanks, Mike. Good luck. Great job so far. Good job. You getting any sleep?
Are the minutes for a special meeting August 5th and special meeting August 24th? Have we had a chance to review those, and are we ready to vote on those?
Well, we have an alteration from one of the members of the public, so I was wondering if we could
Okay,
put...
why don't we move them and then second them, and then we'll consider any amendments or any actions to be taken.
Okay.
Do I have a motion to accept?
Yes. So moved.
Mr. Walsh, is there a second? I'll second. Any discussion on the minutes? Any modifications?
I think I had some, but I don't have them. Never mind. Go ahead. Mr. Byrne from the public had said that Parks and Rec Commission Secretary Jack Tetro disclosed that he is working with local sports image marketing franchise held by Katie Klein. Wife of Larry Klein is on the Fairfield American Little League Board. F-Ball is their first client. Mr. Burns said that the disclosure is okay by the book, yet Jack Tetro did not recuse himself on the project's vote, which is a conflict of interest. I thought there was something in there. What it didn't say was that he wasn't being paid by that organization. I think he just received a banner or something from...
Yeah, I think the point there, and again, just for the record, Jack Tetro is my brother. He's not working with or associated with Sports Image. He works with he volunteers with another youth sports program, and they in fact have Sports Image is working for that program to help them raise money. That's what the relationship is. There's no financial interest or otherwise a conflict of interest in that regard. So that's interesting. Do we want to?
Is that amendment in?
So I think one of the issues, just for discussion, is the fact that the statement's not correct, but Jen, he did in fact make that statement because he was reading off a prepared statement. So from the standpoint of the minutes, he did say that, even though that's not correct. So he requested that we correct the minutes to reflect his incorrect statement.
Well, you could put in the part where you corrected him, and that would solve the problem. You could put in what he wants and put in the correction.
I don't care if you want to wait and propose something, get back to us, and we'll put it approve it at our next meeting. I really don't care.
Okay.
You know, maybe that would make more sense than wasting time here today.
Mr.
Great.
Walsh, I think you've got a good point. Jen, if we could, was that a motion to propose?
I'm going to make a motion to
postpone
postpone
this to
this
date certain?
to our next meeting, our next regularly scheduled meeting.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Any more discussion on that? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Jen, if you could make a note to that, and also make a note that I get a corrected statement on what that is. So, all right, next up, minutes from August 24th. Do I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay,
Go.
we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you. Next up, we're doing the tax collector refunds, so that's underway. Next up, Special Project Standing Building Committee. Consider and act upon an updated bonding resolution regarding the Sherman School project. Mr. Speciale, are you here to present? All right, I think that we've got the podium all set up.
I would just say that I'm here to present in conjunction with Pamela and Mike, we're also on the special committee. Many of the people in the audience and some of the selectmen were at the meeting last night, and a vote was cast, what was called as of last night, as option 2, which has been distributed, I trust, to everybody today, as Sherman, FEMA, soft costs, no option. This is the plan program. It's the, consider the opinion of most of the body that this is the proper path to go down relative to Sherman. It's certainly more money than we anticipated at the very beginning, but we feel that it would be foolish to do anything less than what we have proposed in this final work of the figures. I would just take the opportunity to liken what we're trying to do here is if the school needed a new boiler, we certainly wouldn't go to the cheapest fuel available, which would be coal or something like that. Nor should we do anything where we don't take advantage of the technology and put the proper ventilating systems on the roof of this building, even at the additional costs that are indicated on this sheet. I think the decision that goes forward lies, of course, with this body here. And any questions you might have relative to the figures here, please feel free to direct them at me, Pamela, or Michael. Oh, all right. You want to do that with the? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. You all received in your Board of Selectmen packet information regarding a spreadsheet which contained 3 pages and then backup documentation regarding the project benefits, FEMA background, the history of the project, where we stand right now, some frequently asked questions, and then we attached some letters and correspondence from some appropriate town officials, school principals, stuff like that. If you turn to the FEMA spreadsheet that you have in front of you, it says Sherman, FEMA, and soft costs. This is our new proposal. If you remember, we stood before this body, feels like eons ago. I honestly could be years. And we asked for an appropriation to do core upgrades at Sherman School. We received an appropriation in the amount of $2.2 million. We put the project out to bid, and all of the bids came in over our project cap. So we've met with tons of stakeholders. We've met with the building department. We've met with town planning and zoning regarding FEMA and central office, Board of Education, and we have decided to, rather than ask you to reduce the scope, further reduce the scope of this project, to instead come forward and ask for additional funding in the amount of $1.7 million so that we can move forward with doing the Sherman project as we originally planned, which is to add on additional classroom teaching space in the administrative wing, improve safety and security in that area, and do ventilation work throughout the building. And that pretty much in a nutshell is a summation of where we are and why we're standing before you today.
Anything else to present?
No, I mean, everything really was all in the materials. I don't know if anybody has any questions on that. I don't want to bore you by reading them. I could go through highlights if you desire, or, you know, Rich and I can try and answer questions.
Given when this information came in, I think it would be reasonable to ask for some highlights so that
Sure.
The board has that.
If you start with page 1, you'll see that we outline the project benefits, which are obviously to improve the air quality in the classrooms, the APR, and the gym. We're looking to improve the security and safety for all of our students and staff. And then we outline some of the things that will happen to make that happen in terms of increasing visibility, putting in new double door locking system, a vestibule entry, and then by adding the new ventilation system, it'll eliminate the need to open classroom doors, which is obviously a security threat. Another benefit is adding the teaching space and making improvements to the administration wing. And this includes adding a private and respectful ADA compliant nursing station, a private and respectful meeting space for our school psychologist, special education teaching space, and gifted and talented teaching space. And then our fourth objective and the benefit of this project is to add a much needed second serving line and to make improvements in our kitchen. This would allow more adequate eating time for our students. It will give us better ventilation in the kitchen itself, and it will increase the food storage area. As everyone is well aware, Sherman is one of our more populated schools, and due to the increase in enrollment over there, we need more food storage. I think everybody's pretty much aware that this is a school that's in a FEMA zone, and therefore cannot move this project forward without spending a lot of money to bring it up to code if we go over the 50% assessment mark. And Sherman, as we've recently learned, is the 50% assessment mark is roughly $2 million. So that's our FEMA limit. We've worked with Jim Wendt, the Assistant Director of Town Planning and Zoning, and to Mr. Gillerin, the building official, to look at the conditions of Sherman School. And they determined that based on the current air quality levels in the classrooms, that represents a code violation. And as such, because it's a code violation, that number does not count against our FEMA number. So we're able to pull that work out against FEMA. Mr. Wendt further determined that because we currently have a ventilation system in the APR and in the gymnasium, it's not a code violation. They're old, they're inadequate, but they need to be upgraded, and that's considered a maintenance issue. So therefore, that does count against the FEMA number. New construction obviously counts against FEMA. And when we started to look at all this, and the only way to make it work with the way that the bids came in, the numbers that we're dealing with, and the FEMA cap that we're faced with, the result is we need to spread this project over 3 years. We need to basically take a 1-year break because there's a 1-year gap. Once you're issued a CO on a building, you have 1 year. You have to have a 1-year lapse before you can go back in without triggering the FEMA number. Then just by way of history, I sort of gave you the highlight on that already. This has just been a project that's been ongoing for a long time. It's something the Sherman community has been more than patiently waiting to get done. Their PTA has been actively involved in attending our meetings and offering input. And, as I mentioned, they're just patiently waiting these simple, really what I call basic needs. Breathing and eating and security are, things that we expect in our school system outside of learning. So, these are the things that we're looking for. We've had numerous delays caused by multitudes of different things. We had a couple of issues getting this over to town planning and zoning. We had some issues with lead time on ordering ventilation equipment. We thought we could break this into 2 pieces and make it work with our construction schedule, and that didn't happen. And then when the bids were opened, on July 13th, and they were above and beyond our cap, we faced yet another problem. So we were back here, which is why we're back here looking for more funding. Probably one of the most important pieces in this packet is where we are right now. We've reviewed all of our project options, the revisions, the timelines with the Board of Education, with central administration, with school administration. We've confirmed the FEMA constraints. We've confirmed the code compliance issues. We've reviewed all the scope options and responsive bidders, with the purchasing department, and we've heard input from the public, specifically the Sherman community. So based on that, all of that information, we are here looking to revise the project authorized funding from $2.2 million to $3.9 million, and this would include a revised bond resolution. And if you look on the current project status page, we give you an outline of when the work would begin. It's still now split into two parts. What we call the administrative wing, which includes the second serving line in the kitchen, its storage space, the ventilation in the kitchen, the safety and security improvements, and the admin wing, and and then the construction of the teaching space in the admin wing. That would all take place, hopefully, if we receive all the appropriate approvals, late October 2011, and we hope to have that work completed by February 2012. So that would be an occupied renovation, which the school is aware of and we are fully prepared to deal with. Then, as I mentioned earlier, we'd have to take 1 year off from the time the CO is issued. And then we would come back and we would begin work on the energy recovery system and the ventilation work in the existing classrooms, the APR and the gym. The work in the APR and the gym would begin in May 2013 and be completed by August of 2013. And the work in the existing classrooms would begin in June to be completed by August 2013. And that's because you can't do the work while the kids are in the classrooms. This project scope and definition is exactly what we put out to bid back in July. The only difference now when we stand before you is that we have added in the energy recovery system as part of the project instead of an alternate. We feel that we will get a financial reward from this, and it's the appropriate thing to do for the school district, and it'll offer up a savings. That's pretty much where we are in a nutshell. The rest are, just frequently asked questions that we've received from various people throughout this long ongoing process. There's a letter here from some members of the Sherman PTA who've attended the meeting in support of this. There is an email from Jim Wendt explaining his rulings on the FEMA issues, and then there is a email from the building principal, Eileen Roxby, also expressing her support of the project. And then you have the spreadsheet that has all the numbers on it. That's pretty much it.
All right, any questions from the board?
Yeah, I've got a bunch of questions.
Okay, you can start. I'll follow you, Mr. Wampler.
Rich, you want to stand up here with me?
From the time of your last presentation, what was added? Because I thought the number that we were getting close to was $800,000 of additional money, and now we appear to be, if I take the $3,944,872 and I subtract what's been approved of $2.2 million, I'm coming to what I believe the number of $1,744,872.
Rich?
It seems like kind of a large increase. It's almost, if you take out the soft costs, it's almost doubling the request.
There's a lot of, actually, if you take a look at the numbers here and you start to look at the contingencies, which we have really loaded this project up with, we have almost $680,000 in contingencies. So that's a good portion of where the extra money is. We don't know that we're going to use all that money. We hope that we're not, but we're trying to put together a project that we're not going to be going back to any panel board looking for more money because we didn't figure it right. Okay. So we have an extremely high 15% contingency rate. Because we are going to be rebidding part of this project in the after the 1 year hiatus, we have also added in a 10% bid elevation. We don't know if that's going to happen, but we want to cover all our bases. We don't want any surprises.
That's separate and apart from the $680,000?
No. That's part of it.
So it's part of the
Part of the
15%.
Yeah.
The $800,000 number that you're working off of, you really ought to work off of when we originally set, we thought it was gonna be 1.2 million. The 800,000 didn't include ventilation work in the APR or the kitchen.
Right.
I mean, or the gymnasium.
So those are hard products that are now included in the body of this work here.
The 800,000 also didn't include the cost to do energy recovery.
So the $800,000 was just basically the cost, not the cost overrun, but the bid overrun on the bare bones project.
Right. New contingencies, because the figure has escalated. So the contingency has to escalate because you're no longer at 2.2, now you're up. So
The $680,000 in contingency that you talk about that's in the project now, as proposed today, how does that compare to the contingencies that were in the project when you were last before us? Because clearly, there were contingencies in the project. You're not
Yes.
talking about a fresh $680,000.
No, they probably were about half of that at that point. And there was no bid escalation because we had planned to do it monolithically. We're gonna
But the
do it.
bid escalation is contained within the 15% contingency, correct?
No.
No, that's separate.
That's separate.
Okay.
Mr. Walsh?
But it's part of the 680,000 that I
Yeah.
referred to.
Just to chime in here a bit, to clarify, I've got, as I look at the sheet, when I look at the year three costs, there's 156 grand in the year three costs that, in essence, is an allowance for price escalation for the rebid. Is that correct?
The 153, you're looking at this one, right? It's 100,
FEMA and soft cost sheet?
It's the only one, it's the one,
Yeah,
it's
FEMA and
155.
soft cost at the top.
Yeah, 155.
Yeah, it's 155, 348.
no,
No?
No, I know.
That's-
Yeah.
Mike, was
bid.
your question, was that
Let me
bid
finish.
escalation?
No, that's
see,
Construction
construction.
contingency,
Yeah.
post-bid.
yeah, that's not what I'm saying. You've got, in year three, a bid differential of 10% at 62,000. You've got, in year three, a bid differential at 10% of 94,000. You add those together, that's 156,000. So you're allowing for $156,000 in price escalation when you go out to rebid this. Is that correct?
That's right, that's right.
Okay, that's part one. And then to Mr. Walsh's point, one of the reasons there's so much more contingency than the first project is because think of all the rest as being, contingency is 15% of the rest. If they increase the cost, they also increase, that 15% goes on the increased cost part of this.
Sure.
So there is a lot more contingency because the overall project costs more. So that 15% is on 15% of a bigger number.
Correct.
All right? So those are the two reasons there's a huge contingency jump. Part one, because you're allowing for price escalation for the portion of the work being done in year three, and then because there's more dollars being proposed overall compared to the 2.2, right? There's 15% on top of the additional costs that are also going to that contingency number.
That's absolutely right.
All right, thank you, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Walsh, I didn't mean to cut in.
No
Back
problem.
to you
No,
if you
no,
like.
That's fine, sure. Okay. I was at yesterday's committee meeting, and there was a lot of talk, and I was asking a lot of questions regarding this energy recovery system, because you had two options before you yesterday. Basically, it was to do all the additions and renovation, to do the classroom ventilation, and to do the cafeteria and gym ventilation, which was a total number of about $3.5 million. And then you had another option wherein you added on the energy recovery system, and the number popped up to the number you're requesting today, the $3.944872, so $3.9 million approximately. And the difference between those two options was $400,000 approximately. And we asked a lot of questions because, to me, the only difference between those two options was adding the energy recovery system on. To me, that's a cost of $400,000. Me and your architect, Mr. Weil, went round and round. Because the numbers show that the cost recovery of the energy recovery cost is approximately, on a mean basis, $126,150. So the question was, where did the other $275,000 approximately come from, which turns out to be the fact that between option 1 and option 2, we have to use a different company to do the work based on the bids that came in approximately on July 13th. So where there was, if we don't do the energy recovery system, there are efficiencies in the other bids of approximately $275,000. Now, Ms. Holland did some calculations, which I was with clients most of the day, so I didn't have a chance to print out. I don't know if you have a copy of that, to show what the breakdown of the $400,000 is. I saw that you sent me an email on my phone. Do you have that here?
Send it to your phone?
Well, no, it goes to my office address, but then I saw on my phone when I was meeting with clients that you sent me something. I don't have it here.
Okay. I didn't make copies, I only have.
Can you make some copies, and we'll get back to that? I think you should probably make like 30 in case people in the room want some. Thank you.
And there's copies here for the public on the
For
table.
everything else.
But to me, to the taxpayer, regardless, the two options, and you went for the higher one because there was belief on your board that they wanted that energy recovery system. It increased the cost to go in that option by $400,000.
It's not,
Well,
that's
Wait,
not quite
wait,
accurate.
wait for him to ask a question.
Yes, we can answer your question. Is that your question?
No,
There's no question.
There's no
There
question.
That's right.
But you know what? Now, you guys obviously have some new information, so why don't you come forward with it? Because now,
No, there's no-
I might be going on a whole line of questioning that is now gonna change, because now it seems like you might have more information from last night's meeting.
That's not.
No,
No,
it's
go
not
ahead,
the
no,
case.
ask your question.
No. Why don't you come forward with the information? I just don't wanna go
No,
down a line
It's
of
not
questioning.
new information.
Okay.
What it is last night, the discussion went quite lengthy and wasn't clarified. You can't label the $400,000 to energy recovery. It's only $126,000 that's been estimated for energy recovery. The rest is escalation to do it in 3 phases, in a 3-year project because of the FEMA. It's not energy recovery.
Okay. But if I'm doing a cost analysis for the taxpayer of Fairfield, who's actually gonna pay for this project, right?
Sure.
I have one project that has energy recovery in it, and I have one that does not. The one that does not have energy recovery in it is $400,000 less. Am I missing something?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm hoping you're gonna lower the number, so I wanna hear how.
No, the numbers speak for themselves. We're in a condition or a circumstance that because of the FEMA limit, we have to go into a phasing of the project. The bidders unbalanced their bid to begin with. So the bid that, the option 1 that you're referring to, Jim, has a higher base bid, which includes most likely a portion that would go towards the classroom ventilation. The classroom ventilation has in it ventilation, doesn't need energy recovery. It was a good option. So that premium of 126 is just that. It's a premium. You take that out of the mix, and you're still left with $275,000 in escalation to go to option 2.
Okay, but if I don't wanna do the energy recovery, how much less is the project?
$275,000.
Oh, I still have to pay,
$275, because we're going into a 3rd year.
That's not right.
No.
It isn't. It's the $400,000 that you mentioned, because of the way that because we wouldn't be doing the energy recovery.
now, if I don't wanna do the energy recovery system, how much less would the project come in from the request that you gave us of $3,944,870?
On the gym and in the APR room, those figures have an energy recovery figure already in them. That's in them.
At the $3,000,005 number?
Yes.
Okay. So if I don't want to do the energy recovery from the classrooms, then, is what you're saying?
Correct.
How much less
You
is
would take out
bid?
the energy recovery of 126.
Okay. I want you to explain to me then, I'm going to show you something from yesterday. Please explain to me, if I wanted to do option 1, why option one is $400,000 less.
Okay.
I'll let you refer to it.
If you take a look at the bid of 553, 356, I can give this back to you, Jim, because I have.
Okay.
That is the figure that was provided by THP, who, during the vetting process, we had some vetting of South Sea and THP. Both of those contractors indicated that they would not be willing to do the classroom ventilations without doing the additions and renovations, okay? They both said that they had made mistakes with their bids, both of those contractors. So basically, you're starting with a bogus figure to begin with.
The $3,500,000?
No, the 553
Okay.
is not, if you look at the average of the other bidders, you're going to see that it's close, very, very close to $900,000.
One's 211.
Which is one of the ones that I'm saying is, that's South Sea, and he's just not even, and that's way too low, as you can realize. THP already has said that he won't do one without the other because his bid is the electric, he doesn't know what the electrical contractor put inside the heating and ventilating or kept in the new additions and renovations. So he won't do one without the other, because that's the only way he feels that he's safe. But both of them are not valid bids when you look at the mean of the other competent bidders. They put it up in the range of about 900,000. Now, because of that, Jim, that we have to elevate the contingency, and that's driving us higher and higher and higher.
You haven't answered the question of how is option one $3,500,000, and the other option two, which is the one your board chose, $3,900,000. The only difference is energy recovery in the classrooms only.
I'm saying that if you would award to those, either one of those two contractors, you're not going to get the job done.
Wait a minute.
Can I ask a
Wait
question?
a minute.
Can I ask a related question?
Go ahead, but I want to get
You
to
can
that.
go
We're
back
not
to
going to
it,
get
but
the
I
job
think what
done.
you said, I think what I recall from the original bid is that when we were looking at them, they were taking Part A from one and Part B from another and
Right.
putting them together, but
Right.
what you're saying is they can't do it that way. They have to do them combined, and when you look at the numbers for all the bidders, you would expect that there'd be a high, a low, and kind of a bunch of them in the middle.
correct.
And in this case, if he's looking at the 500,000 in, what was that, item one? Then you're looking at a number that's not really a valid number. It's the lowest number on the group by a fair amount. And so if you look at the average of the other ones, it's about 900,000, which brings the number up, which brings the bid differentials up, and as Mike said, the reserve or whatever, contingency is up.
Yeah.
So that number, that 500, needs to be replaced by one that has one bidder doing those two items on the,
But we're using the same contractors bid on Part A, which is
No, we're not.
almo-
We're using
$1,660,068.
We're using Secondino's figure.
No, you're not. Here it is, right here.
On option two, we're using Secondino.
I'm not talking about Seconditos. I'm talking about on the option one. I thought we were talking about option one, where you talked about the 553, 356, which is a THP number.
Correct.
On Part B, and a 1,660,068 number for Part A. We're using that number too, which is, getting close to $200,000 above Secondino. So how
Yeah,
people bid on jobs, you might underbid one part of the job and overbid the other part of the job, but they're telling you they need to do both parts of the job.
Correct.
So they're getting their profit margin in there one way or the other.
I-
Now, let's get back to the part that you said, we will not get this job done.
If you
Because
take,
I think I'm going to need to hear from the assistant town attorney and Ms. Holland about what do you mean by we will not get this job done when we got legitimate bids in, we sent this out for an FRP, or a request for proposal, RFP, And we will not get the job done if we sign on with one of these companies?
The figure of 211,000 for the ventilating work, when I checked back with the IES, who's the heating, the expert, the engineer that's in charge of his figures, what were they again, architect, remember offhand, was like,
Just for
the equipment itself?
10 to 12,000 a unit, about that total of 125,000.
And then the other two units?
Probably 500,000 total between two.
So we're talking about $600 and some odd $1,000. So how do you do that for $211,000?
Well, we're not talking about Salcian, the numbers in option
Well,
one, we're talking about THP. Did you guys do a scope review with THP, and they said that they can do the entire scope of what you've requested for $553,356?
If it is done along with the addition renovation work, yes.
Well,
they've
just,
confirmed that.
so we can hear this properly, Mr. Walsh,
Sure.
if you would. Ms. Holland, would you come up to the podium so we can make sure that we get that captured for everybody? Thank you. Sorry, Jim.
No problem.
We did do a scope review with 3 contractors. And Richard is correct. Both Salcy and Tomlinson Hawley Patterson have some irregularities in the way they bid the project. And they cannot do the addition renovations and the classroom ventilation work as independent projects. They can do both of them together. We believe that, or for this discussion purposes, we're using the number from Tomlinson, Hawley, and Patterson as a number that is a good number. They've
So,
confirmed that they can do the work. They'll do the classroom additions for the 16.6. They'll do the ventilation work for the $500,000 and change, if that's the way the project ends up looking.
so if we use them for both, we can get the job done, or can we not get the job done? 'Cause
We can
Rich
get
said
the
we
job
couldn't get
done.
the job. We can get the job done.
Yes, they did confirm during the scope review that they do have some, they are carrying some costs for the ventilation work in the addition and vice versa, but they can do both aspects of that project for the amount that they bid.
Okay, if I might.
Sure.
It sounds like you're concerned, and there might be a risk factor going with option one, or the contractors as specified in option one. Can you help us understand what that risk factor is? What are your concerns?
There's a very real risk here when you take a look at this option one, which if you take a look at your figure, $1.9 million, okay? 1.909.
That's the total FEMA cost.
Yes. All we're allowed on this project is $2 million, $1,000. With the slightest thing, something going awry, we could eat up less than 100. We can eat up $100,000 very quickly. If we do an excavation, we find underground vaults, we find bad soil, all the things that are known to happen to it, the train station. I hate to bring it up, but there's a lot so you're very, very close to that FEMA limit. And then what do you do if you go over that? Then we're really in a jam. So that's another reason why I'm recommending option two, which is 1.7 million. At least we're pretty reasonably assured that we're not going to cap out on our FEMA figure.
But under that option one, I mean, I hear what you're saying about the 1.9, but in your 1.9 number, you have a 15% contingency equal to $222,000. We have a town piece of property that we've owned for pretty much ever. And as far as we know, a piece of property, unlike the train station, which we went into it knowing that it was an environmental nightmare,
Right.
which we do not have at this school. And now, you know, we have $222,000 in our pocket, and you think that we might hit underground vaults?
I've been in this business for 40 years, and I can tell you, when you do a boring, or you do an analysis of subsoil conditions, you are being told what's in that hole. You don't know what's 2 feet away from there, Jim. You just don't. It's happened, I can't tell you how many times to me as an engineer. I would not take the risk. When we open up those footings, if the 2-ton bearing capacity is not there, then we have to do something to adjust for the lack of bearing capability. That could be piles. That could be, God forbid it's piles, but it could be. Or at the very least, we'll have to start to excavate, bring in suitable fill, bring in lifts, compact at 95%, so on and so forth. That's money, real big money, real quick.
So basically, you were right, I just want to go back, you were right in terms of they are using the same form numbers, that was changed from the other form that I had looked at. So, but you're saying you're picking the higher number for the first part because of the fact that, or the lower number for the first part, because that's overall a very hefty, what is it, 2.1 if you use the 166, which has a lower second part number. That would be in 3 years, right? This is probably not making a lot of sense to me, but right now, you're picking, the reason you're selecting, the firm that you're selecting with the 148, even though the bottom number is going to be higher, your first section of money being spent is lower.
It is lower,
And,
yes.
and it's giving you a little bit more cushion for the FEMA regulations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And since you can't choose another contractor for the other portion, you have to go with what they have, and he's in the ballpark at the 894 with all the other guys,
Right.
so it's not like he's way out of
And
it.
that's not to say that the THP would rebid it later and give us the same $553,000.
They might.
Maybe he will.
Right.
But we just, the
You have to be
committee
conservative in
is
your
not
estimate.
going to go back 4 and 5 times, as usually happens on projects. We want to get it right now. Everybody's been here.
So it's
Too many
just,
times
this is just
already.
because we have a funny situation with FEMA, we've got to work around all those numbers, and because of that, it's spreading it out over a longer period of time. The bottom line may not be this high, but you have to take into consideration that it could be that high, so as not to come back and have enough contingency and everything else involved, and have enough leeway in your first number, so if something went wrong, you'd have a little bit of play for that first section this year.
As you just said.
Okay. Somebody
But
understands that.
To me, there seems to be that play. I mean, because,
Well, it is in the second one, but it's not in the first.
well.
2112.
2112.
That's the FEMA number there.
That's including soft costs, so you can't include the
Yeah,
soft
but the other
costs.
ones, all right, well, if you go the other way,
1.9.
19 and 17.
19.
And they go up to 21, so you have 400,000 in one and 200
Well, the
in
19
other.
has $249,000 of contingency in there. There's $250,000 of contingency based in that number. We're starting off with a number for Part A, at least, of $1,660,000.
Correct.
So, to me, we've seemed like we've added $250,000 on, plus we still have play in that number by another $100,000. What you're saying, Rich, which I'm sensitive to the whole FEMA total, is that you'd rather start out with that number of $1,702,000, so that we'd have more play of about $400,000. I'm
Not-
telling you, there's no possible way that I'd want you, that would require you to come back here after we've approved this money and ask for another $400,000, and that's not gonna happen.
Well,
Yeah, it's not,
I mean, it's just not gonna happen. I mean, we're approving a lot more money, or you're asking us to approve a lot more money, and then you're saying that you might have to come back to us at a certain point and ask for
Yeah.
upwards of $400,000.
that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, but you wanna have that wiggle room of $400,000.
Yes.
Okay, I don't want you to have that wiggle room, because I really want you to do whatever you need to do,
Well,
not to have that $400,000 worth of wiggle room, because this thing's over budget significantly from what we originally
not
approved.
based on what Turner estimated, it's not over budget, it's on the budget based on.
No, you're right. Turner budgeted $5.2 million,
Correct, right.
and your committee worked with the previous first selectman and came down and said you guys could do a scope of work for $1.9 million. Now, somewhere along the line, that number seemed to be significantly off. And
Because-
from what I understand, the previous first selectman, Mr. Flato, knew it was gonna be significantly off. And there might be other people in town hall who knew it was gonna be significantly off.
I can't.
But the problem is now we're here and we're throwing these numbers around, like adding things on for $400,000 and now, I thought it was for the energy recovery system. Now you kind of want to do part of it to have some more wiggle room on top of a 15% contingency. So what you're really saying is that you would like to have a 30% contingency, like in your head though, not maybe have the number.
Can I?
Yeah, sure.
It might seem that way, but yes, the contingencies are built into there. But the estimate that we used, that $900,000 estimate in option 2, was based upon a mean of the bidders currently bid. So we know it's high, or maybe it's not high. Maybe it's appropriate that we're estimating a number that we think we can achieve with a bid, rather than putting forth a false number, trying to achieve it and falsely, because we never can get to it. So yes, it's higher, but it wasn't we're not just building contingency upon contingency. There was a logic and a method to determine why we chose that mean number.
And also, Jim, that 1.9 figure, we have added more to the project. We've added the gym, we've added the APR room. There's real substance that has gone into the increase in that number. That's why it's up there.
And you have further contingencies down the way for that, of 15% for each of those projects.
Right.
So.
Yeah, it might be a little bit high.
But it's safe.
Well, I'm wondering whether it's safe in option 1. I mean, to circle this whole conversation around, trying to get back to where I was going, is that to me, when I look at these numbers from last night, option 1 versus option 2 is $400,000 cost, and the only thing I get for the $400,000 is an energy recovery, regardless of the reasons, regardless of $126,000 for the cost of the energy recovery system, the cost of having to go with a different bidder because they can't get both sides of the project. The net cost to the town of Fairfield taxpayer is $400,000 for an energy recovery system. Correct?
Which you will get back in 16 years at $25,000 per year.
Okay. That's 16-year recovery.
Right.
On a 20-year piece of equipment, which to me
The-
doesn't seem
the-
like
the-
a
By the way,
great
the piece of,
return.
the equipment that we ordered for, there's been very serious thought about the equipment that was ordered for this because of the environment, the adjacency, the sea spray. That equipment that was purchased, well, would be purchased, is the top of the line. It doesn't have screws that are made. It's stainless steel screws. There's a lot of consideration that went into the environment that this has to live in. So we're counting on getting, the building is 50 years old, and we hope we can get, we're certainly not going to get another 50 out of those units, but we're going for the high end of everything so that they last as long as they can.
Okay.
So it's, we are thinking about this.
Just to
Sure.
break down a bit. Just, again, to clarify one of the discussion points from earlier, if I look at option 1, we're saying Part A for the AR, the teaching, admin, kitchen spaces, comes in at $1,660,000 from that bidder. If we put in a contingency, and that's a contingency on the construction, which is an industry standard. So that has come in at most places, and certainly if our historical projects had ended under budget a whole lot, then perhaps we could say that in Fairfield we do projects for a lot less than industry standard. I think most folks would agree that our projects have come in, sometimes under, sometimes close, and sometimes a little over budget. So 15% that the industry standard probably works for us. That comes in at, add those two together, that's 1,900,000 and change. That's less than $100,000 away from the FEMA limit.
Correct.
Actually 91,000 away from the FEMA limit, which is, if anything goes awry, is a very tight issue. And again, the issue we're worried about that is because if we break the FEMA limit, we then have to bring it up to current codes, and then that project cost jumps up to $3, $4, $5 million for just that component. We've got to go back and redo a lot of the components in the school. So that's not, hey, we're over FEMA limit, no big deal, we'll pay a fine. That's over FEMA, very big deal, we pay a couple of $1 million fine. So that's the reason we're so sensitive in terms of staying away from that. Just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. It's not just, oh yeah, it's FEMA, it's a big deal. So when we look at, so that's, if you will, not 109,000, about $100,000 difference versus maintaining a cushion, if you will, away from the FEMA limit in option 2 of because the work comes in for the same construction at $1,480,000. Consequently, 15% of that number is less, so that would be $222,000. That comes in at the $1.7 million number, and that provides a $300,000 cushion for staying away from the FEMA limit. So if perchance we blow the contingency, well, we're still in good shape on that portion of the project and staying away from FEMA, which is a much lower risk scenario
Correct.
for the town. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. And then potentially, some of that money or costs are moved back to year 2 and 3 in that one. Did the contractors, did we vet them enough to know if they gave any reason for the difference between just under 1.5 in one bid and just under 1.7 in the other bid for doing roughly the same work?
No.
Okay, so that's a $200,000 gap in basically the same work that we're not clear as to what's driving that.
No, the contractors, we never went that deep with them.
Okay. Mr. Walsh, we get permission, I'm going to ask Ms. Stenick if she has any, just to give her a chance.
Yeah.
Did you have any follow-up questions at this point?
No, I think I'm glad that you're using materials that are appropriate or planning on using materials appropriate for the area close to the water where you'd have rust and whatnot. And I'm also glad you're looking at energy recovery. And I think that it makes sense to me. I mean, Mike said it much more eloquently than I did, but I think that the 1.7 makes sense for the first part of the project versus the 1.9, just to be safe, because we've already had enough things blow up along the way. Do we need one more thing?
Today.
I know. I was going to say it. They had a water main go today. So,
All right.
she's
Mr.
waiting
Walsh?
for locusts, she said next. So hopefully we can pass that one.
Mr. Walsh, back to you.
Yeah. I'd like to talk for a second about the estimates for the energy recovery system for the savings per year of $25,000. We didn't seem to have any documentation. There seemed to be a number that Mr. Wild chose. Is he here? Okay. Do we have any
But we do have a
better?
representative.
Yeah.
Representative from his firm
Yeah,
is here.
sure.
Okay.
Do we have any number? I mean, I guess I'm surprised. I mean, I know George represented yesterday's meeting that it would cost $15,000 to do an energy study. But with all the buildings that we've done in town, with all the buildings that you guys have done, where energy recovery systems have been used, and I thought I saw Sal here. Sal here? Yeah. I mean, that there must be some basis to know, based on square footage and sizes, what the actual number or somewhere near an estimate would be. And I would think that the manufacturer of this high-end device would, in their sales department, have something that would try to tell you what the recovery period would be based on square footage, BTUs, things like that.
They can,
Excuse me, if I could ask, before you get started, if you could state your
Yes.
name and position so that's
Yes,
clear for the
Branch
record.
Obst, Wiles Architects, I'm one of the designers at the firm. They can give you a general idea of payback. It all depends on how hot it is in November or how cold it is in November. There's a lot of variables that happen. There are square footages, but then how much fenestration is there? How many windows? What's the roof construction? Is it tight and small with very little, I would say cushioning from the elements like we have at Sherman? Well, that's very different than a school that has 3 stories and it's constructed 10 years ago. So there are some variables that you'd have to really dig into and run numbers to generate a very accurate number. But we would say that roughly 25,000 is a good estimate for that recovery in terms of money.
Okay. And as I told the committee, I was gonna think about some of this stuff, and one of the things I started thinking about was that the $25,000 a year savings was based on basically this year. And obviously, energy costs go up on a yearly basis to some degree. We've generally, at least I've not seen them in my own bills, go down. However, I guess that's a possibility. So I started making some calls to some people I know who are in the energy business on regards to, I presume we'd be using natural gas
Yes.
on that system,
Yes.
correct? Because that tempers the air on the way in,
That's
correct?
correct. Yep.
So we probably use natural gas because it's cheaper, and it's predicted to be cheaper, at least where this board has had that issue come up in the last 6 months.
Just to clarify, is the energy costs relating only to heating the school, or also relate to?
No, that's in terms of just the rooftop units to temper the air to.
And all they provide is heat?
They provide fresh air. So it's not heat because there's radiant heat already there. You're not dumping 30-degree air onto the school.
Okay, just questioning why the gas price is relevant versus, are they powered by gas?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
And I prepared a sheet, because it just seemed to me $25,000 every year, and trying to look at this over a 20-year period. So I'm going to hand this out, just to kind of show you, I think, what a more realistic payout would be. If you can give one to Sherry, I have a number of copies. Basically, this is based on the $25,000 per year, just so that everyone can understand my assumptions. Clearly, in years 2011, 2012, there was no, we're not having any savings those years because the system's not going to be in place. It's not going to be to 2013. However, there is an inflationary amount that this company told me, at least in the numbers this year, they're steady. But next year, 5.15% increase. You can see in the percent year-over-year increase is what they're predicting for the next. They would only predict out 15 years. So I did calculations then based on what the $25,000 would try to be with increased in energy costs year over year. And then I started to accumulate what the savings would be starting in 2013, because that's when it will first be in place, down. Now, in order to have it go out the full 20 years, and since their numbers only went out 5 years, I took an average, you see about 3/4 of the way down, of what the previous 15 years averages of increases were, and it equaled 4.61%, and just applied that to the remaining point in time. But based on this analysis, which I know is, we're not paying for any analysis, but based on this, the payout would be this is on $400,000, which I consider to be the total cost to put this thing on. It would take just after 11 years, slightly after 11 years. But that the total savings over time would be $900,511. Because I just thought that, energy costs, I think, need to be, I don't know if anybody on this board disagrees, but I don't think that we can just plan on the $25,000 being flat. I mean, to some degree, this system has to get the benefit of the doubt to some degree that it's going to save us money.
What's the, just to confirm one of Mr. Walsh's operating assumptions here, what's the life of the energy recovery system?
These particular units, I think, are 20-year. It's a 20-year life cycle.
That's what I always thought was at minimum 20 year. Could be beyond that.
Okay.
Mr. Weil, I think last night, confirmed the same thing at their meeting. And that's why I went out the full 20 years. So and I understand that the $400,000 that we'd be paying in 2013 or sometime down the line has an interest rate with a bond attached to it. but I don't think it would change it all that drastically considering the recent rates we got. We can't predict that they will still have those in 2013.
Yeah.
However,
Yeah, the recent, just to be clear, the recent rates we got, the .19,
Yeah.
that was for a ban.
Yes.
Those are for notes for 1
Okay.
year.
Yeah, that's
The
true.
bonded number is higher and
About
probably.
3%?
Between, say, 2.5 and 3, you kind of
Yeah.
off in that range. And again, the checkpoint for that,
Mhm.
Danbury that got .27 for a ban,
Okay,
got 2.7 for a 20-year note at the same time.
okay.
All right, so within that framework. So looking at that, say we get that 2 to 2.5.
Yeah.
Would be a ballpark on that.
So whereas the cumulative savings on, with this, based on these assumptions, which if they come true, would be approximately $900,000, we'd be paying $400, and that might seem like a $500,000 savings. The actual cost of savings is probably a little bit less because of interest over a 20-year loan. So I think, I wanted to do that calculation only because I just thought it was important to try to figure out what the total savings might be. And also to see what the payback would be, because 16 years is a long time to have a payback over. Especially, I understand that from your standpoint, that if the energy recovery system's $126,000, you'd be looking at getting a payback under my assumptions at slightly after the 4th year for just the system and mechanics itself. But as I've explained, the total cost to me is $400,000 because that's the difference between the two options. Is there anything you could see from your architectural side where I'm missing something, or if those numbers were correct, do you think that's a proper way of looking at it?
I mean, you could look at it that way. I think that the 25,000 is a good estimate. Again, it's an estimate.
When you do estimates, though, do you put inflationary increases on it? Like it's 25,000 now, but because energy costs go up, that down the line that the actual savings are more, or do you just normally just flatline it over the 20 years so that it looks like the savings will be $25,000 regardless of what happens energy costs over 20 years?
I don't do any estimating because it can get complicated, but
Okay.
it's something that we would hire something like Turner to do, and I would assume that they would escalate just like they would pad a number if it was a 5-year project for long lead times and et cetera, et cetera. We feel that they would a company hired to do estimating would do it that way.
And Sal, do you guys have any experience with these systems? And what their savings are?
Mr. Walsh, if I could ask you,
Yeah.
if you're going to refer to somebody else,
Sure.
if you're done with a person at hand, if you could.
I'm done with
Okay.
this gentleman. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
And I'll ask Mr. Morbido to come to the
Actually,
lectern.
I will.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Mr. Morbido, if you could join us at the podium, please. Sorry, just trying to keep us on track.
Do you have these systems in any other schools?
Yes, Stratfield, that was just renovated, has energy recovery units. As far as their exact payback for those units, we don't have a study like that. Fairfield Woods has a lot of new ventilation systems for the addition and some renovated areas. There is energy recovery there. There was an energy study done through the architect, through Taisu Kim, for that, and I can verify what they were saying. Doing an energy model of a building is expensive. I recall that one costing $30,000. That was to prove some code issues for reimbursement. But I don't have actual data to say these recovery units in comparison to a like building will have a payback. I don't have that kind of information.
And you don't get any materials from the manufacturers of these devices on what the cost savings could be?
If somebody was selling you a product, they would tout their energy savings. You would get a nice brochure that says you can save up to 30%, but until you sit down and do the engineering on any one particular building, you're not going to get a hard, fast number on it. You're going to get generalities.
Without getting a hard, fast number in the brochures that we have gotten in regards to the energy recovery systems that we have purchased, what does it estimate your cost savings would be?
Can you repeat that?
Yes. You said that when you purchase it, you get a brochure about touting what the cost efficiency savings would be for an energy recovery system.
I wasn't part of that for the Stratfield project, so I wouldn't feel comfortable answering that question, but I'm sure that there was a study done by Silver Petroselli on that.
All right. I mean, what's concerning, I guess, a little bit to me is that we're basing some of this decision on a cost savings. We've tried to request that this board before cost-benefit analysis on things. Once again, here's another situation where we're kind of relying on just a nice round number of $25,000 and have no way to prove it, despite the fact that we have these systems kind of starting to go district-wide. You might have it for a part of Fairfield Woods, because you did a study there.
The new systems for the new additions have energy recovery. There were some new systems added within the renovated space for some spaces there, but that building committee did not wholesale go and replace units that were still functional and still, had years of life left to them.
Anything in terms of a payback period?
They didn't discuss that as far as payback for that particular item. It is
so-
kind of standard course to have an energy recovery within designs. Present day, it's normal practice.
Okay, to Mr. Walsh's point, though, it's as much as we're all in favor of lowering our carbon footprint, sustainability, watching what's taking place, do we just add those costs on without looking at what the payback is? There isn't any cost-benefit analysis done at all?
For the example for both for Stratfield and for Fairfield Woods, those were required to be designed towards the LEED Silver standard, which required a certain level of energy efficiency over and above code. And I believe that's 21% of the base building code for energy efficiency for those units that it applies to. The energy study was done to compare a code-compliant building, much like what we're talking about, to everything that they did. It wasn't just the energy recovery units on the ventilation systems. It's the lights, the type of boiler you have, a whole bunch of energy use items that we're taking in consideration into that, and you have to come above a baseline given by code by at least, I believe the number is 21%, and they exceeded that in those cases for those buildings. So
Just to clarify, when you say you have to be above that,
to
who
meet
is-
the
Who
standard.
is saying that, and why is that standard something we're obligated to?
Okay, under state law for state reimbursement for school projects, when you receive more than $2 million worth of state reimbursement, there's a state statute that requires you to follow LEED Silver standard. That LEED Silver standard is based on a saving over and above standard building codes, the state building code.
But their energy efficiencies comprehend the entire, if you will, energy efficient system, not just the energy recovery component, but everything else that's provided
That's just
as part of
one
it.
item in the
So
alphabet.
there's no component that's measured, it's the entire system that's
Correct.
measured. Now, and I guess this gets back to Mr. Speciale, we're not going for state reimbursement on this. So we're not required to meet that code for that. So why was it chosen to spend even $125,000 on this if it's not required?
Because there's wisdom in applying technology that's available. I mean, the energy recovery system is going to allow people to breathe properly. I mean, it's going to humidify the air.
If I can answer that, it was originally it was all, that was part of, we never considered it outside of the project. Problem was, when the estimates were being run, we had to start, just like removing, rooms that we desperately needed. Well, that was something that we took off, and our engineer said, you know, it's not a good idea, but yes, it'll save you money. So that's what that's why the energy recovery was removed from the previous bid
Yeah,
package.
that makes sense. I understand the energy recovery piece, I think. Does this do anything for air quality?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly something to be said about the air quality with energy recovery and without it. To put a dollar number to that, it's
How
very
about
difficult.
just the quality? Now, what's the difference in the air with and without the energy recovery?
During the wintertime, it enhances the humidity, and during the summertime, it diminishes the humidity.
Yeah, you're taking cold air and running it across the coils to heat up, bring it into a room. You know, you're extracting that that air that's at, say, 70. Without energy recovery, you just dump it into the atmosphere. Now you take cold air again, do the same thing. So instead of doing that with energy recovery, you take that air that's now down maybe 10 degrees less, bring it out, and so you're only raising it, you know, a couple degrees. So the temperature and the quality of air there is a benefit to having it.
Okay, in terms of quality of air.
Yes.
It's on the
Yes.
frequently asked questions. The last sentence of item 9 is the benefit of using energy recovery is the ability to meet the ASH RAE ventilation and energy standards while improving indoor air quality and reducing total ventilation equipment capacity. And it mentioned the same thing before that about the pre-cooling and dehumidifying the air in the warmer seasons and humidifying and preheating the air in the cooler seasons.
Okay, so what we're saying then is the energy recovery piece saves us some money.
Yes.
And
Even if we're not sure exactly how much or what the payback is, though it might extend over some 10 to 20 years. But while it's doing that, it also raises the quality of the air. So that
Yeah, it'll meet ASHRAE, and yeah, there's
Okay, you just said ASHRAE. Could you explain what that means, please?
It's the acronym that Ms. Stenick used. It's
Okay, could you explain what she said?
where are my engineers so I can, not that you would understand,
Certain, one thing, whatever the letters are, it certainly will help stand for. It certainly will help with allergies and any of the other airborne problems that might manifest itself because of the lack of this equipment.
Explain that. How's it going to cut down on allergies? Are we taking pollutants out of the air if we have
No,
let's be clear and just not throw things out here. Are we taking pollutants out of the air by putting this energy recovery system on? Because that's not what I'm thinking an energy recovery system is. Are there filters? Are there, you know...
There are no filters.
Are there kids with asthma in this school who are going to be in a better situation with the energy recovery than not the energy recovery?
That I can't answer.
Okay. Are pollutants being taken out of the air with the energy recovery
Not with energy
system?
recovery, no.
Great. Thank you. I just would wish everybody would just think before we all speak, because, I mean, we can't be saying stuff that's not true. Okay?
Any other questions at this time?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions for Mr. Wendt, and I saw that he was here, and I appreciate Jimmy showing up
Gentlemen-
after hours.
Yeah, gentlemen, thank you. And Mr. Wendt, if you'd be kind enough to step up to the podium. Again, just your name and position so that any folks watching this on Fair TV will know from whence you came.
My name is Jim Wendt, and I'm the town's assistant planning director.
And under your job title, you are basically the FEMA compliance officer for the town?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Jim, you and I had a conversation, but I just want to be clear on the record, because I'm concerned about some of the definitions of, because I see some of the maintenance work goes to the FEMA limit, whereas some of the code compliance work does not. And since we're getting so close to the limit with this project on a year-to-year basis, I just wanted to be clear about a couple of things. Number one, the FEMA limit resets 1 year after certificate of occupancy has been granted, correct?
Correct. As long as the projects are separate and distinct. That's what's unique about this project is these ventilation options can be done as standalone projects. The addition, they're not dependent. You don't have to, as a result of doing the addition to the building, put new ventilation in the gym. That's a separate and distinct project. So yes, if you have separate and distinct projects, you get a clean slate with your cost under the substantial improvement definition, 1 year from the CO of the first project.
Okay. The other question I had was with maintenance issues, because obviously I think we're gonna probably have to keep track of these before the CO, after the work is started, but before the CO. And you and I had a concern that what happens if an emergency happens, such as a water main breaking, like today, or something else that's not within our control, or a furnace blowing up, and we, on an emergency basis, to keep the school operational, have to invest that money in the course of a project. And now we have, say, a $300,000 expense that we didn't expect.
Right. There's a difference between a casualty loss that may occur versus what's a substantial improvement. And FEMA treats those as two separate analyses. Something like a water main break, for example, that's mostly going to be exterior work, would not contribute towards the value or the cost of the improvement of the building. If a furnace blows up, or not blows up, but ceases to function, and the building cannot be heated, I think we could safely treat that as a code issue, that in the absence of replacing that item, you'd have a code violation. So that could be FEMA exempted number. Routine maintenance, such as replacing the equipment because it's reached its lifespan and it needs to be done, would count towards the number. So if there was a casualty or that could be exempted, but if your furnace is 25 years old and conks out and you need to replace it, that would be contributory to the FEMA number. But
So
if you
like
suffer a casualty loss, it would be exempted.
So in a case where there was like a pipe in a wall in the boys' bathroom, that would be considered a maintenance issue?
Right.
If it was, not a casualty?
Correct.
Same thing if there was a, God forbid, a small fire in part of the building and we had to replace it, that's considered a casualty, so that does not go against the FEMA cap during the year period of time?
Right, as long as that particular casualty isn't in and of itself a 50% loss.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Jim. I just wanted to clarify some of that stuff for the record. Thank you.
Oh, okay. And if I could, Mr. Quinn, before you sit down, because we've gone through a couple different reviews on this, is this the final review? Is there any other review that FEMA does or you do on FEMA's behalf in your function that would re-review, re-look at, reevaluate, perhaps change any of the assumptions and considerations that we're making at this point?
Well, FEMA doesn't do any separate review. We are tasked locally with carrying out their regulations for the town to be eligible for flood insurance. If there's new information available, we'd be happy to look at it at any point, but based on the information that we have to date, this is where we are.
So if we don't change the plan as it's currently configured, and if perchance we were to move forward with this plan, there would be no other time that FEMA would take a look at this, or you on their behalf in your role as FEMA compliance officer, look at this and change any consideration.
Right. That analysis is done prior to the issuance of a building permit, so I have no reason to think that that would change at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Sorry, Mr. Walsh, back to you.
Through you, Mr. First Selectman, to Ms. Holland.
Ms. Holland, if you would. And Twig, again, if you'd be kind of name and position so that, for the record.
I'm still Twig Holland. I'm Director of Purchasing for the town.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Twig, you said earlier that you had gone through a scope review with 3 of the parties. That was Salcy, Tomlinson Hawley, Patterson, and Secondino, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
The other process that needs to be done is you need to go through their credentials and things like that, right?
We do. We do a thorough reference check on the low bidder, typically.
Okay. And last night you said that that takes about 6 days, correct?
It does. It's a fairly extensive process, and a fair amount of the time is spent in playing phone tag and chasing the references to get them to sit still long
Is that
enough to
6
chat.
days per reference or 6 days to do the whole project?
Would be to do all the references on, say, the 2 or 3 lowest bidders.
Okay. Because my concern is, if we go through the 3 lowest bidders and we have issues with all of them, then what happens? We have to come back for more money?
There is that risk. One of the bidders we have worked with, we've worked with Secondino in the past, and we know the quality and the caliber, pardon me, of their work. The town does have some experience with Salsey contracting prior to my arrival here. So we would check their references very thoroughly. And Tomlinson Hawley Patterson is a well-established firm that's been in business for, I think, over 50 years. They're generally well-known in the area. They do a lot of municipal construction projects that are right around this size, some smaller, some a little bit larger. But this, I'm fairly confident that their references are going to check out okay. I would be quite surprised if they didn't.
It would make sense that if we approve money for this, that process start immediately prior to the RTM getting it, because I don't know whether we're going to want to go round and round and go through 3 bodies and not know by the end whether we have a problem or not.
Right.
And since we will have time before the RTM meeting, I know the Board of Finance is tomorrow, that we should probably commence the project if this board is so inclined to move forward with this project with some funding. So I don't know what everybody else's thoughts here are, but it seems as though.
Let me,
Sure.
with your permission,
Sure.
let me rephrase what you just said.
Yes.
Normally, a body like this would not get involved in anything that resembles vendor selection, because that's really the building committee. We'd approve a number, it would go out to bid, and had the bid number come in at an appropriate level this summer, the vendor selection process would have gone on without it ever coming back to this board. And here where I'm going to paraphrase Mr. Walsh, so if I misstate this, please. Given a big part of this is the cost differential, and given the cost differential doesn't seem to be driven by the work on most projects, in this case it seems to be driven by the bid that came back. Given there's some question as when there's this kind of disparity in bid work coming back, and I think as is pointed out, because the bids were packaged differently by the vendors, there's some question as to the qualifications and responsiveness of the bidders to this bid. I would agree with Mr. Walsh's suggestion that because that's such a big component of this, that we might want to proceed that, and consequently Mr. Walsh might want to make that part of the motion at that point. Not so much as to tell the building committee what to do, as much as, because everything we do here, when we approve, whether we approve 3.4 or 3.9, or don't approve them, but if we were to approve them, the number we approve would be an authorization to spend up until this amount. It's not an authorization to spend that amount, it's an authorization to spend up to that. So theoretically, we could approve the 3.9, and if there were a lower responsive bidder out there, the building committee, I believe, and Ms. Holland, correct me if I'm wrong here, we're obligated to go with the lowest responsive bidder or not?
Yes, we typically go with the lowest qualified bidder.
So if we were to approve 3.9, just for discussion purposes, and your vetting of Salsey and THP came back and said one or either of those would be appropriate, would that mean that the building committee would go with, by our guidelines, that bid? Or are there any other differences between option 1 and option 2?
There aren't any other differences. We would take the lowest responsive bidder. So if the approval, reset, it would depend on the approval amount. So if the amount in option 1 were approved, then we would vet those 2 contractors and work with either one of those.
All right, and just again, let me be clear, so if we approve the 3.9, is there any difference between option 1 and option 2 in terms of what Sherman would look like at the end of the project? And could one of the building committee members perhaps talk, are these two options identical except for the cost?
Options 1 and option 2.
Yep. If you could, just to-
Option
'cause I think
one-
that speaks to Mr. Walsh's point.
Option 1 does not include the energy recovery for the classrooms. Option 2 does.
Okay, so other than energy recovery for the classrooms,
Correct. Are they different? No.
okay. Is there energy recovery for anything else, the gyms, the cafeteria, any of that, or
There
is it
is
just classroom?
energy recovery built
Included in
into
the
the
So for
gym
that,
and the APR.
okay, so that part of the ventilation system comes packaged with energy recovery regardless of which option we use. So the only question then is, do we do energy recovery in the classroom ventilation system?
Correct.
And if the vendors, the contractors would vet out, then would there be any reason that the building committee would recommend that we not choose the lowest bid, other than the energy recovery piece?
Well, just so you know, if we are looking at option 2, the lowest responsive bidder there is a third contractor, that's Secondino.
Right. But that's Secondito's quotes plus energy recovery is what drives that 3.9 number.
Correct. Is there any reason not to go with the no, none
Is
to
there
my
any reason not
knowledge?
to go with option 1? And we're saying there's no way to get energy recovery in the classroom ventilation system in option 1. We can't add it on.
That is correct.
Really? We can't, I mean, we price it separately, it's $126,000, and we can't add it on to the ventilation system?
Different units. It's not something that you add to a
What
unit.
about the FEMA number?
The
Does
entire
that hit
unit
the
comes
FEMA
with
That would be
energy
part of the
recovery.
FEMA.
Okay, so the different manufacturer, guys, we could have one conversation here,
Sorry.
please?
Sorry.
And,
Yeah. The energy recovery is not a add-on piece. It comes packaged in the entire unit itself.
even in option 2, so what we're really saying
Yes.
is that they're buying a separate, there are two different HVAC units, am I using that the
That's
correct term?
correct, yes.
Both come with, one comes with energy recovery, one doesn't.
That's right.
All right, so our friends Salsi and THP bid without the energy recovery.
It was an alternate when they bid it, yes. So that,
So
not to
that-
confuse things any further than it already has
Yeah,
been.
that allowed them, so they could be responsive to the bid because we made it an alternate, and bid that without energy recovery, because we said that was in essence allowable within our specifications.
Mhm.
And that allowed them to go with a lower cost HVAC unit that in essence does the ventilation than our friends at Secondino. All right, can Secondino use the other units? Can if THP and Salsa use the energy recovery units, does that increase the cost, $400,000?
That I don't know, but I do know that when they bid it, the energy recovery was an alternate for all the bidders for that particular rooftop equipment ventilation system.
If we were to approve this without energy, if we go to option 2 without energy recovery, do we save any more than $125,000, or do we save a whole lot more than that?
Yes.
Could they then use
Ms.
another equivalent, if you will, to meet the ventilation requirement and not have to go with the one they actually did?
If you went to option 2 without the energy recovery, you would have option 1.
Right, but could Secondino
He's
use
asking
different
Secondino.
equipment? Or do they have to use what they bid, and do they, because in essence, they bid to a higher specification than the other guys.
Given that it was bid separately and it was a separately priced alternate, Secondino was the highest bid for the energy recovery.
Right, but it's not really an alternate. He basically is saying, I'm going to buy HVAC units with the energy recovery capability, so it's going to cost me $125,000 more than buying units without that. Or did I misunderstand?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not following this.
Trying to get down to the difference between option 1 and option 2, what I think I'm hearing is
Okay.
that it's different HVAC units. It's not really necessarily different bid number.
Can I ask a question that might help clarify?
Go right ahead.
In option 1, without the energy recovery systems, you're basically looking at Salsi or
THP, correct?
That's correct.
And both of them seem to give an energy recovery quote as an add-on. One's 101,000, and one's 94,632. Can we not just add $100,000 onto option 1 and get energy recovery in the classrooms?
We looked at that, and adding that, say if you take, because we're using THP numbers
Yeah.
as the safe numbers to use. When you look at doing the addition renovations for $1,660,000, you have your contingency of 15%, and if nothing goes wrong, if everything goes perfectly, on paper, you could take their alternate for the energy recovery of $94,613 and do it along with the classroom work,
Okay.
with the classroom renovation. But there's a risk associated with that, because if anything goes wrong, you're over the FEMA money.
Okay. Let me
And we did consider that.
Let me just clarify also what you're saying then, because what we're saying then is, in year 1, Part A, and basically included in the costs that go against the FEMA cap, we have the classroom ventilation in option 1. Is that correct?
No.
Okay, then why were you talking about the 1.6 and the energy recovery option?
If you look at the bid results, it's not shown on this page because it was risky. It's not shown as part of this option. But if you turn to the bid analysis, the second sheet, and you look at the numbers from THP, you see the $1,660,000
Yes.
and change. Keep in mind that number, add the contingency. Now we're up to $1,009,000.
Yep.
If everything goes well, absolutely flawlessly, during the addition renovation phase, and the equipment can be gotten in time, the bid for the energy recovery equipment from Tomlinson Hawley Patterson is, say, rounding up $95,000. It just squeaks under the FEMA limit.
All right, and that's, why are you comparing it to the 1.6? And because we're not doing, that doesn't include the HVAC upgrades at all.
The energy recovery, as I understand it, has to be done, for the classrooms, has to be done at the same time as the classroom ventilation space.
But isn't that done in year 2, Part B?
On option 1, it's done in, yes, in year 2, Part B. It's done in the summer.
Okay, and that's an issue because, and so why are you comparing it to the 1.6?
I'm not comparing it to the 1.6. I'm adding it to the 1.6.
Right, why is it relevant to that? Why is it done in year 2? Why is it part of the year 1 number?
It would be part of the year 1 number, but it would be done, the work would be done in year 2.
Why aren't we just increasing the 553 by 100,000 to get to what the...
Because the energy recovery is part of the FEMA number, part of the FEMA limit. You can't do the energy recovery. You can do the classroom as part of code compliance.
Can't do energy recovery.
You
as
cannot
part of
do
that.
energy recovery. That's part of FEMA.
Okay.
So
So what you're telling, let me rephrase that. What you're telling me is that if we bump out year 2 for a year, we could then do this for $400,000 less?
No, because you have to do the energy recovery for the classrooms while you're doing the classrooms. So it has to be done June 12 to August 12. That means you can't start Part B, the ventilation for the cafeteria and the gym, until August 13.
Can we delay that 12 months? and save $400,000? Am I asking that right?
I think so.
On paper, you can. And the risk associated with doing that really is that there can't be any cost overruns on the addition and renovation part of the work.
That's the 1.6 with a contingency that brings it to 1.9.
Right, the 1.9 and the 96, 94, or 95
No, because if
for
the
FEMA.
94 is done 12 months later after the CO, or is it
No,
part of
the
the same
nine-
project and
no,
doesn't
no.
count?
Here's the way the timeline looks. The additions and the renovations for the 1.9 get done between October and February.
Okay, you understand I'm talking about changing the timeline?
I realize that.
Okay.
Okay. Then you start the classroom ventilation, Part B, in June. And along with that, you do the energy recovery
Right.
for the $95,000. The energy recovery is part of the FEMA limitation.
I understand.
So that means you're now at $2 million for your FEMA limit.
When would you start the HVAC upgrades for code compliance? That would include the...
That would be 1 year after you complete the energy recovery in August of 2012.
If we finish year one, Part A, in February 12th,
Right.
if we wait a year from that CO, which is February 13, and then do this during June 13 to August 13, we save $400,000.
Well, SALC and THP will require that it be all done at the same time for their
Right.
number. That's the problem. If we bump that part out, their bids don't hold.
Those bids are we can't use those bids.
That's
Okay,
the problem.
that's what I'm trying to get to. I'm
Here's
trying to get to
another-
what the drivers are that are
Yeah, that's the problem.
working this schedule.
The drivers
That's why
are,
their
yeah.
names are next to those,
Yep.
based
That-
on the time.
That makes, just trying to...
Can I ask another, just going down the road, trying to find another wiggle room in here?
Yep, go ahead.
What happens
Thank
if we approve an extra 100,000? We start work right away in October or whenever on this thing. And we see whether we eat into any of that contingency to see how, like, micromanage this project. Where you're gonna say, don't order the cost recovery HVAC system until we tell you to. So we know where we are in the project. Because there may be room. Number one, we have a 15% contingency still. I understand that we'd be pushing the number up to the limit. But that's taking into account the 15% contingency. But we'll have all the stuff that, I mean, unless you can tell us, the committee can tell us, what are your major areas that you are afraid of on your contingency? It sounds like digging, it sounds like it's the blowout of the space. It sounds like foundation work and things like that. It doesn't sound like it's HVAC work.
To order them. Well, one of the issues last time when we were talking about it is that there's a big lead time because nobody carries any of this stuff in stock.
On paper, to follow up what you're saying, on paper, if we know by February that everything went flawlessly for the addition and renovations, we may be able to order the energy recovery equipment in time to install it along with the classroom HVAC work. But keep in mind, since that energy recovery is part of the $2 million FEMA cap,
Yes.
it sets the timeline. The CO is now August 2012, and now you can't do the cafeteria and the renovation until August 2013.
Got it.
That makes it a 4-year project then.
Yeah, it is.
And you're asking really great questions. We went through all
We've looked, we have turned this upside down and shook it, and we had pages of options. We really
We
did.
probably had 15 options.
Yeah. No, I think that it comes down to this. I think, as Mr. Walsh pointed out, there are a couple options we're asking for. You're suggesting we go with an option that's $400,000 more expensive. I mean, we've been here a couple hours looking at this. I think the RTM spent 8 hours last year to get $200,000 out of the budget. So, you know, in dollars per hour, this is worth every minute we're spending. So I apologize if this is.
No, as I prefaced, you're asking really good questions.
So I think that's important from this standpoint. I think that, and I think that to be fair, I think everybody wants to know what the justification is for that extra $400,000. And again, I'll go back. I realize that we're approving an authorization. We're not requiring you to spend $3.9 million. If you don't hit these contingencies, we spend less. If we find some alternatives in the meantime, you can spend less. So I don't mean to put too much emphasis on that. But on the other hand, the way things make headlines, this is going to read $3.9 million. So we want to make sure that we've done our due diligence there.
Another couple of options, and I'm sure you've shaken this one up too. That unit, that energy recovery unit, is that something that's really, like what Al was saying several months ago, takes a 6 to 8 month lead period? That seems like a device that's on the shelf someplace. That doesn't seem like fabrication of, you know, HVAC lines and stuff like that. So is that a very long lead time to order that?
We're hearing that lead times are 14 to 16 weeks because of the economy and the cost of raw materials, and the fact that a lot of this equipment is highly specialized equipment. We're finding manufacturers simply aren't building for stock. When they have an order, they'll build. And the lead times that have been, in some cases, 8, 10, maybe as long as 12 weeks, we're hearing are being stretched out considerably longer. And that's why all of this gets so dicey. It's quite honestly the reason that one of the reasons why we couldn't start the classroom ventilation now is because we simply could not get the equipment.
Mr. Walsh, anything else at this time?
The
will get a chance
ventilation
again.
period that's on option 1, the part that's in year 3, that's going to be completed during the school year, correct?
That is correct, because that work can start in 1 year after the conclusion of the ad reno. It technically can start in February of 2013. And I believe it can be done while school is occupied.
Okay.
So it would conclude everything with the project in roughly May of that year.
So we'd be talking about bumping that, if we wanted to do this energy recovery system, we'd be talking about bumping that part, year 3 stuff out to maybe the summer.
You would have to.
Yeah.
It would be August, you would be able to start at August 2013, or say on the safe side, September 1st, 2013. And if it could be done in occupied spaces, be done by November. It can't be done?
You can't work overhead.
The HVAC, the gym and the cafeteria?
You might be able to do it there.
Okay,
Not
that's what
classrooms.
we're talking about. Yeah. So the gym and the cafeteria, we theoretically could do probably by November, reasonably
To me,
complete
it seems
by
like it'd be quicker,
December.
because how long is the lead time to order this stuff, this equipment?
16 weeks.
4 months, so 4 months from, we'd know by 4 months from February, putting us into June. And then you'd probably be able to get this done with an unoccupied space over a summer, during a summer. I don't see it going out to the following November.
For a ventilating?
Yes.
Classrooms?
To me, that seems like a reasonable exchange, getting the recovery system for $100,000 and maybe having to bump out the Part 3 work out to that summer as opposed to having it being done during an occupied situation, the gym and the cafeteria in the February to May period.
I think.
And we have cost savings for the whole project for 20 years at a cost of $100,000, not $400,000.
Did you have something else to add to Mr. Walsh's question?
Sorry, I was just checking with Brent on something.
I'm sorry, Ms. Stenick, did you have something to say?
No, I just think there's at some point, we can't micromanage this entire project. At some point, we have to have some trust in the committee that's working on this. And at this point, these numbers, the reason we hired, there are 2 project managers on this committee. There's Jane, right? Jane and Mike are both project managers. So you have people who know about scheduling and doing these things. You've got engineers. Mike's an engineer, you're an engineer. So at some point, they've, all the questions we've asked, they've obviously addressed at some level, and they're trying to accommodate this FEMA thing. I'm not saying you shouldn't ask the question, but what I'm saying is I don't think we can micromanage the scheduling time completely. I think we have to have some faith and give them enough leeway to get the job done.
And I understand you that there are 2 project managers, but at the table last night, they disagreed. Jane thought we shouldn't spend the $400,000, and Mike thought we should. So I'm kind of confused by that. They have different reasons, and I'm going to have a hard time supporting spending an extra $400,000 when out of our pockets already, we just had to spend $7.5 million a week or 2 ago.
We've allocated that amount. We don't necessarily have to spend that
true.
amount. But
That
I
is true.
And this is an allocation, and we don't necessarily know we're going to spend it either. And hopefully, they won't have to use all that contingency. But, when Ken did this the first time around and kind of organized it, the complaint is that everything was too low. And I think that, we've already been bitten by that at this point. And I think at some point, we need to have reasonable numbers that people can work between and try to give them, let them find ways, like from the questions that we're asking, so that they can get the job done in a timely fashion and not have to keep coming back and have to recalculate because we don't have enough time, we don't have enough money, we don't have whatever, or we've overspent the FEMA budget. So I think there's a lot of issues related to this particular project that, and that we don't usually have in every other project. And I think we have to give a little bit more space to the group in this instance.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Just to pick up on that one, and I think that, again, this is an authorization to spend all that, and I think that the Metro Center was clearly identified that we're going to be at least $2 million under that number, but we've got to spend it first in order to get reimbursed on that.
You're correct.
In this case, because there are 2 different, if you will, options for proceeding, what I'm looking at is if we were to approve the 3.9, what, and we vet these vendors, right? And all 3 are acceptable, or either THP or SALSI are acceptable in doing this. What do we do then? Can the building committee please explain to me the kind of the decision process, or Ms. Holland, if that's more in your bailiwick? Yeah.
There aren't 2 options that the building committee has brought to you. We brought you one option. The option that we want includes energy recovery. If you want to pull that out and go with a lesser request, that's certainly your prerogative, and the building committee will adjust to work with that. But I just want to be clear that we only brought forth one option.
And if we were to approve $3.6 million tonight, what would happen? Just over.
I was working that we were only going to do one option, so I didn't bring my first sheet thinking we would go here. We'd have to go back as a building committee, and this is the area that we would have to work with, because then you're working with the lowest responsive bidder, and that's SALSI and THP. Correct me
Now,
if I'm wrong.
since they haven't been vetted out yet,
Correct.
they were vetted out and they didn't come back as appropriate, then what would happen?
What happens then, Ms. Holland? This is something that falls into the venue of the
We have a
purchasing.
number of options. We could go to another bidder. We could rebid the project.
If we were to approve $3.9 million, Actually, we probably have to approve 3.95.
Yes, that's the
Right.
request before you.
If we approve 3.95 and both lower bidders vet out, what would happen?
Under,
I don't want to
Well-
speak for Twig, but I believe she said that we have a working relationship with Secondino,
right.
so I don't believe.
depending on how you want the work done, if you approve the 3.9, we would buy the energy recovery. And in that case, the low bidder is Secondino. Secondino and Sons would do the addition and renovation only. And at some point around October, November of 2012, we would bid all the ventilation equipment and work.
All right, well, again, let me try and understand. The issue here is we approved 3.95, enough to get the highest one in. We vet SALC and THP, and for discussion purposes, let's just say they vet out. Are we saying because they didn't include the energy recovery option, they were not responsive, so they are not the lowest responsive bidders anymore?
Their numbers for the energy recovery, the gym and the cafeteria were not the lowest numbers.
Okay, that gets a bit confusing here. We've got a total that comes up to 3.5 on this sheet, and you're telling me that that's not lower than 3.9?
You have to look at who the low bidders are.
Well, let's just assume that what the sheet says is correct, which is it's SALC and THP.
Okay?
We approve 3.9. You vet all three vendors or contractors. They all come back with A pluses. Are we obligated to go with the 3.5? Is that the lowest responsive bid?
The lowest responsive bid would be Saucy to do all the work.
2680.
Roughly $2.7 million.
So it's $1.2 million difference than going with 3.9. So Mr. Walsh's 400,000 is understated, the cost differential.
But here's the issue with that, Mr. Tetro. We can't, these numbers that you're looking at for the energy recovery, the CAF, and the gymnasium ventilation aren't good for 2013 when the work has to get done. It has to get rebid. And that's why we can't just, it'd be really nice and convenient if we could, but we just can't do it that way.
Okay, well, I guess that's what I was, you're giving me, or giving us, a rationale for why Secondino is the only responsive bidder that we haven't heard for 2 hours into this presentation.
They are the lowest bidder for the addition and renovation work only. So if y'all want the energy recovery to be part of this project,
I don't want anything part of this project that wasn't in the spec and wasn't how it was bid. So if you're telling me that that was a requirement of the bid and that's required to be in here, that's cool. If it wasn't a requirement of the bid, I guess what I'm asking is who was the lowest responsive bidder to the bid as it was bid out? And if you weren't picking, if the building committee didn't select them, then I'd like to hear why the building committee didn't select the lowest responsive bid. And you just mentioned it might be as much as $1 million, and that perked up my ears.
Can I ask you a question? Maybe I'm very confused, but this is how I thought I heard this, and I may be completely off. So
They want to do it as one package.
Right.
I may be completely off on this, and please correct me if I am, because I don't want to screw anybody else up on this. My understanding is the reason you picked, where's the project with a 1 and 2 again? Okay, that's okay, I could use this one. Okay, the reason you picked, who was it, Secondino, was because the numbers were lower in the beginning part of the section. It brought us to 1.4, so you could have $300,000 of leeway, basically, in case there were problems in the project along the way. Not that you're hoping to spend that, but that in case you did, like a water main or some other emergency thing happened that you weren't expecting, it could give us a little more room for play. The the items that are in the lower part, originally, the bidding, as we were getting close, when Ken had the original bidding things going on, and we did the bidding when I was there for that brief time, at that point in time, we were trying to cut that FEMA number because we didn't have all the information from Jim Wen, correct? So we cut out the energy efficiency thing, right, the recovery. So that was taken away and put as an add alternate. But now that you have to go back and revisit it anyway, you put that back in because that was really something we wanted to do because of the indoor air quality and some of the other things and the energy conservation and all that. So you put it back in, which brought us to the next lowest guy. And when I say the lowest guy, the only reason you picked this guy is because it pulled everything together to complete the project. But at some point, you're going to have to rebid all that second part. So these are like these are numbers that you're looking at as being solid. We know we can do it from this because we're using like kind of a middle of the road kind of guy. He's the mean, and we're using that number. Is that right? And so now the question is, and that brings us to the 3.9. You're going to have to rebid that whole second half anyway. So at this point, if you rebid it, you're hoping it's going to be a lot less, and maybe it'll be 2.8. But we don't know what it's going to be, and we have to make some guesstimate. So why not use a guesstimate that we know we can live with and not have to come back to this board and any other board after that to go through this all over again? Is that correct?
Yes.
Right.
Okay. That's what I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay. Yeah, I had that on the calendar. Actually, I didn't know about the meeting last night, so I apologize about that, but somehow I missed that note.
Part of the problem comes in, to your point, Mr. Tetro, is that the bids that we received from Secondino, or not from Secondino, Salsi and THP are predicated on being awarded both parts at the same time. They can't do one independent of the other. Secondino is the lowest bidder for the addition only, and he can do the addition only. So that's one of the things that's making this a little bit more complicated.
Can we award both parts now, today?
I'm sorry?
Can we award both parts today?
There's not enough money to, under the present funding
No,
request.
we go through a new bond resolution, can we award both parts? I mean, that's what we're doing here, we're talking about.
You can award both. You can do the addition and renovation under the FEMA restrictions. You can do the ventilation to the classrooms and those associated costs. And that's all you can do.
Okay. So if I look at option 1, would I draw a line after year 2 and say that's above the line, that's what we would bid today, and below the line we would rebid?
Yes.
And will either of those contractors do it under that format?
The classroom, the addition and renovations, and the HVAC upgrades? Yes.
And they're willing to rebid the gym, cafeteria, ventilation pieces for later? And if I go to the option 2 and draw a line right where it says year 2, the 1.9 above that would be part of what we would award if we move forward from here. And the balance below that, we would rebid somewhere in that year 2 to get new numbers for the balance of the work.
That's correct.
Got a question. So we when we rebid it, Mr. Hiller, is bond counsel here?
He's getting water right now. He should be back right back.
Right back.
Just got a question as to how that works with the bond resolution. We've got 2 different kind of bid authorizations there, but it's all packed into one bond resolution.
You got a stage.
Unless I leave to go out.
We waited 2 hours.
Deduct that from
Mr.
your
Stafford, Mr. Stafford, if you would come up to the podium, if you would. Jim and Sherry, that's okay if I see that.
I'm John Staffstrom. I'm from Pullman and Conley, the town's bond counsel.
Mr. Stafford, thank you. Had a question as to, and let's just take option 2 for the moment, the $3.9
$3.950
million option.
Right.
here, as we're looking at that, that's going to be spread, we're going to bid, or have bid, part of it. And am I correct in saying that we bid parts, so we know we can do the 1.9 right now, and those are hard numbers, building committee? Right here, it says 1.95. We know those are hard numbers, right?
Yes.
Okay. No. And then, no. So when we get to year 3 on this, and we bid it again, does that impact the bond resolution at all, or is that 3.9 bond resolution, if we approve it today, does that go for the next 3 years? Are we,
The 3.9 covers the entire project.
okay.
So, I mean, obviously, if you authorize the project at the total amount of the it's actually 3.950, I think.
Yes,
If you
correct.
authorize the total amount of the project, you're not only going to spend that money as you need to spend that money. And I know there's been a lot of questions on the contingency. If you don't, in fact, spend all that money, if you only spent 3.7 or 3.8, presumably you wouldn't bond for the 3.950 because you're only going to bond for what you use.
If we start construction on October 11, later this year,
Correct.
when do we have to bond the money by? Is it tied to when we spend it, or is it tied to when the initial resolution was? Do we have to bond it within 3 years fully, or?
Do you have to bond it within 3 years? The money, probably yes.
So we have to bond all 3.9 million within 3 years
You
of
probably
October
have to
11?
encumber it. I think your normal process here is to do notes and then encumber it with bonds.
Right.
So presumably for the first phase of it, if you're going to start the construction in October,
Yeah.
you'll put something in your June bond and note issue, either or bond money or note money. But yes, if you passed a resolution of the 3.950 now, you would have to take some action to encumber that within 3 years.
Okay, so I guess, let me rephrase my question then. We currently have a 2-year project that says we're going to finish in October of 13. If that got bumped to a year for some unforeseen reason, and it's October of 14, we have to in fact bond this money, all 3.9 million, by that amount, by that time, right?
Correct. You would have to encumber it in some way. You might not bond it, you might issue notes, but you would have the obligation to at some point turn it into bond. That's correct.
Okay, so getting it into note fashion would be fine at that point if we had to.
Correct.
All right, and then it's really from the notes that there's a 3-year time period that we have to turn it into a more permanent bond.
Well, you have to encumber it within 3 years of this resolution,
Okay.
and then you normally, I think under state law, you can roll the notes up to 5 years now, not just 3 years.
We can go up to 8 too, under statute.
Right. And you normally don't do that because it's not good practice. You normally have not been doing that because the long-term rates have been so good.
Yep, I'm not suggesting we do that, just want to confirm the
Yes.
timeframes and what the constraints are.
You have a number of options if you should finance the full 3.95 now, including, I think, as the project evolves, you'll get a look at whether the contingencies have actually been spent or not to decide how much the town, in fact, does need to borrow. I mean, if you will recall, the background of this, where this all first started, is there was a proposal at some point to just do a part of the project within the original 2.2. But that is not how the resolution was originally structured. The original resolution originally structured contemplated the entire project. So when your finance director came to us and said, can I do this? The answer from bond counsel was no, because the project was contemplated as being something larger than that for the 2.2, which is why we're back for this whole discussion. Because otherwise somebody, Mr. Tetro, could have said, okay, let's do phase 1 within the existing 2.2, and then we'll come back later. But that's not how the project description was drafted in the original resolution.
And is the revised bond resolution similar to the original bond resolution in terms of the description of the project?
No, the revised bond resolution on Appendix Exhibit A is where the description is, and you'll notice the description is broad enough to encompass everything that's now included within the project.
I see.
Let me get the resolution.
Ah. Okay, if I read Exhibit A. Construction cost includes addition and renovation for teaching, administrative, and kitchen spaces, classroom ventilation, energy recovery, cafeteria ventilation, gym ventilation, soft costs, and contingencies, 3.9. Does this in essence tell me, or tell us, that energy recovery is a required part of the project?
Within the parameters of the draft resolution that we prepared, which is the entire 3.950, I mean, we were asked to prepare a resolution that sort of encompassed the entire project, understanding that you or the other town bodies may decide then to change that. But this resolution encompasses the entire 3.950. If there was a way, for example, where you could decide the energy recovery costs X and you didn't want to fund that, we could reduce the amount of the resolution. What I'm hearing from the discussion for the last couple hours is the energy recovery is actually integral to a lot of different parts of the project and can't necessarily be, if there are parts of this that could be broken out. There was some discussion, for example, at the Board of Finance meeting that took this up in July or August, that if we decided not to ventilate the gym, how much would this reduce the resolution by? If we decided not to do the cafeteria ventilation, how much could we reduce this by? So I think, unless the purchasing director tells me differently, or the committee tells me differently, there is a way to break this into pieces if you wanted to, but not necessarily taking out the energy recovery, which is sort of integral to lots of different parts of the project.
Yeah, I'm trying to get back to the original bond resolution that this
Sure.
is updating. And is there a description of that project, and did that include this detail? Did the original bond resolution include the energy recovery, cafeteria ventilation, and gym ventilation?
It did not include this. It did not include, the resolution itself did not. The issue with the original resolution is there were very specific requirements that were included in the package that was presented to all the boards as to what this would look like. Yeah. And therefore, and the 2.2 resolution encompassed a lot of this, which really couldn't be done for the 2.2.
So even though it wasn't included in the specific wording in the resolution, because it was included in the presentation,
correct,
it is understood to be
correct,
which is a good standard. I've certainly argued for that standard for a lot of years here. Was energy recovery included as part of that presentation?
I do not recall.
What I'm trying to get to is, are we required to do energy recovery because it was included within the description of the original 2.2 million? So consequently, since we're updating that, are we required to do the energy recovery? That's where I'm trying to get to.
Well, I would answer the question whether or not it was included in the original resolution, since you at this point haven't borrowed any of the money under the original resolution. Okay? I think you can amend the scope of the project to be what you want it to be within this new resolution.
Mr. Hiller, could you come to the mic and confirm that? Have we borrowed any of the money under the 2.2 resolution?
We have borrowed the 2.2 million.
Okay, so
on a ban.
So
not permanent.
Okay, back to Mr. Stafford. Would that confine us to the description of not reducing that description any? I realize we might be able to expand that with what we're doing, or perhaps you can ask me that.
Could I just add this?
Sure.
As I recall, and I can go upstairs and check it, but that resolution has a Schedule A on it, as I recall, but it did not have the terminology energy recovery on that. I think that was on that schedule, because that's the resolution.
But it's really what's a question of what was included in the packet, because I think that's what you referenced in telling us that we had to include the ventilation.
Doesn't have an exhibit. This does not have
Did not have the
what it's
exhibit.
got,
I
is the
take that
materials
back,
that were
yeah.
presented.
And
Which was adopted back in February.
Right. Did those materials include energy recovery?
There was no Schedule A on it. Costs include architectural design, financing, specialty consultant, environmental engineering, testing, equipment,
He's
materials,
talking about the
construction, and
background materials.
renovation.
I don't recall that the background materials had energy.
I do not remember them including.
I don't think that was included. I mean, unfortunately, I did not bring those background records with me, but I do not.
Which is sort of how the building committee got to where we are,
Okay.
in the fact that this is all the same, except that we've added the energy recovery
Well, see, that's exactly the point I want to clarify. If in fact, if the energy recovery were included in the original description, then we wouldn't necessarily be able to cut that out at any point. If in fact, the packet did not include that, that would be an option perhaps for this board or other boards going forward to make an adjustment. But we're kind of tied into the original description and what that packet was, according to Mr. Staffson's ruling
Well, that,
early on, I believe.
what I would say is that the February resolution does not specify energy recovery. The Schedule A was some of the options that were brought forward at the August, I believe it was the August Board of Finance meeting, which Mr. Staffstrom was in attendance.
Right, but it's the ventilation that was potentially going to be cut out, and will do part of the project. To Mr. Walsh's original question back when we confronted this in August, and we were told we couldn't cut it out because it was mentioned as part of the packet. So my question is there anything else in the packet that we need to notify this board or other boards that we can't adjust this by? So to make sure that, am I saying that right?
I think you are, yes.
Mr. Tetro, I just want to clarify, I don't know that we said you couldn't cut it out of the package. I think what we were saying is that the original resolution was all-encompassing at 2.2, so that when the building committee came back and said we can do part of this for 2.2, and then, but not the rest, we said you really can't do that, because what the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance and the RTM contemplated is they were getting a whole project for their money, not just that. Okay. So that's what necessitated the entire thing coming back to the boards, is to say, what do you really want to do here for the project? Because what was approved initially was a complete project, which you now don't have enough money to do.
And I guess my question is, if we borrowed 2.2 million and basically included certain things in that, are we constrained by what that definition is? Or if we, whatever we approve here as part of this bond resolution, does that supersede whatever we've approved till now?
I think you could modify, I think as you're passing a new resolution with new money, you can modify the scope of the project.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that.
As long as that 2.2 is spent within the project, I think you can do that.
Okay.
Our concern was that when the bids came in, if the building committee had gone out and spent the 2.2 for what somebody thought, all the other bodies thought was a complete project, you weren't getting a complete project, you were definitely getting a partial project. Now you can decide, I think, within the parameters of this coming back to you within the scope of the project. I mean, from my point of view, conceivably, the boards could, you and the other boards could decide to just stick with the 2.2 and change the scope of the project.
Okay.
Or you can decide to expand the scope of the project to what everybody thinks it needs to be.
Okay, thank you, that's much clearer. To the board, we've had folks waiting for quite a while here. Would you mind if we went to public
Well, Mr.
comment?
Staffstrom's stuff there, I've got a kind of a question, I think, that will follow if it's relevant while we're on the subject of this bonding. Mr. Staffstrom.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to go with a little bit of a hybrid question, but do you have the two options up there?
Yes, I do.
Okay. If I wanted, or was so inclined, to amend the what's before us right now, or whatever, but I wanted to go with option one, but I wanted to add money onto the option one number, say around $100,000, so it'd be about $3,650,000 for round purposes. Is there a way that I could say, and the extra $100,000, just to put my cards on the table, is for an energy recovery system that is an ad alternate to both vendors who fit under that, the THP number and the SALSI number. But is there a way to put something in the bond resolution that if during the course of construction that we ran into some issues and it was going to force the some type of cost overrun that would eat up that extra $100,000 I put into the energy recovery? Is there a way to kind of have play both ends of the fence there? I don't know if you're understanding what I'm saying, but.
I think I'm understanding what
What
you're
I'm
saying.
saying is, we're gonna start construction, and so some of the numbers on some of these contingencies we have, we'll know along the way. And my thought is, if things go as planned, or even close to, because there's about 15% contingency in there, so they can even go a little bit above plan. But if we get to the point where we realize that we can afford, under my 3.3,650,000 number, could afford to put the energy recovery system in, can we write it so that it's legally contained in the bonding resolution? But on the other hand, if we needed to take it out, we could take it out. And I guess goes to what Schedule A says, whether it's mentioned, the energy recovery is mentioned in there or not, or mentioned as an ad alternate. I'm not sure.
You really can't have a contingent bond resolution, so you can't say we're approving maybe 3.5 and maybe 3.6 depending upon where this goes. I guess my question would be back to the purchasing folks is, if you approved a 3.641 instead of a 3.541, I mean, can you get the chosen contractor to enter into a contract that's within the amount of that money to do the project? I'm understanding that there's some contingencies built into the project, because then you presumably would have enough to do the project.
So you're saying some type of fixed cost contract?
I don't know what type of contract you're going to enter into with them.
We have to bid it all over
Do you mind if we went to the public?
again. And then we still have the
Sure, you okay
problem of
with
the
going to public?
HVAC
I would love it.
equipment being
I'm
2 years
just sort of
from now.
holding my tongue for saying, well,
Yep.
more
If
questions.
I might, I want to thank you for your comments. We'd like to go to take some public comment now, given the hour. At this time, is there any comment from the public?
Pamela Iacono, I'm going to take off my Special Project Standing Building Committee member hat and speak as the Vice Chairman of the Board of Education, and just tell you that at our last Board of Education meeting, we took a sense of the body that we are in full support of this project as presented today. And that's because I discussed all of the options with the board, and let it be known that there was a possibility that the gym ventilation and the APR ventilation may not happen. And the board really wanted to see that take place. So I just want to go on record and let you all know that. I also want to just recognize Eileen Roxby, who's here from Sherman School, who I'm sure will speak. Sal Morbido left, and I want to introduce to you the Deputy Superintendent of Schools, Karen Parks, who has joined us and is here obviously in support of this project. And Dr. Title sends his regrets. He had a conflict this evening. So thank you for your time on all of this.
Hello, Eileen Roxby, principal at Roger Sherman. We have been very patient. And when we hear talk going back to starting over and rebidding this project, my heart just flutters. We still have people in closets to this day at Sherman School, and it's unacceptable. Ask any teacher in that building what it's like when it's warm in this school. People cry, they're so hot. Children wilt, they're in the nurse's office. We need this done, and we need it done now. We need it done yesterday. To even think that this could be postponed another time because of a number that's not working out. This project has been cut from what we need to what we desperately have to have. This is not even anywhere near being a project that is sexy. This is a project that is just the bare bones. We don't have a gym. We don't have a stage to use. We can't fit children in our APR still. And we still have people in closets. And this project doesn't even address a lot of that. And so when we talk about equity in buildings and what other building projects are involved in, and we're sitting here fighting over energy recovery. I get a little upset about what we need, and I feel a little neglected at Sherman, but I understand because of FEMA and where you're at, and I appreciate all the work you've done. But the parents have been so supportive, and they've been at every meeting. And the Board of Ed has been supportive, central office has been supportive. This building committee has been supportive, and so we really just hope that everyone will come together and get this project started. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public?
Meredith McCormick, Fairfield Beach Road. I'm a Sherman parent who's been involved in this project for the past 2 years, and I think it's a tough decision. I've gone back and forth on whether or not we need this energy recovery system, but the bottom line is, from what I'm hearing, if we have it, the air quality will be better, and that is the point of this project, to improve air quality. Mr. Walsh did some great calculations. Hopefully those come true, because that makes the financial sense of it. I was with you, Mr. Walsh, yesterday when you were saying it costs $400,000. But the question that wasn't asked yesterday that has now been clarified is the money spent on air quality, on the air recovery system, will improve air quality. That's the bottom line. That's what we need. So I just asked you to support the option that was brought before you tonight. Thank you.
Hi, Sarah Janot, 115 Paulding Street, and Sherman parent and PTA president. And I think you've all heard everything. It makes my heart swell to see so many people here for our kids this late, and you don't even have kids there. I hope that I can trust everyone here to really just do the right thing at this point. Whatever you think the right thing is, please do the right thing. That's all. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Thank you all. Hearing none, back to the board. Any follow-up questions here?
I do have Twig. You said that you get under the numbers for THP that we could squeeze in the 94,613 under the 2,001,000. I mean, my calculation says that's 2,003,691. Am I missing something?
And probably some contingency too.
Well, yeah, they can add contingency on for the 94,000, which would bring it up to another 10,000.
That's the product price for installations.
Sorry. What number did you get? I just did a back of the envelope.
Sure, 19, because we're looking at option 1 to
19,909.
19,078. If I add 94,613, which was, I wasn't adding, all I was really doing was taking the THP number of 90, where they have
94,613, yes.
I'm getting 2,003,691.
We're a couple $1,000s over.
Couple of $1,000 over. So we basically have to sacrifice a little bit of contingency in order to squeeze that out.
You really would. I guess one of two things would have to happen. Either the project has to go perfectly and you don't spend the contingency, or the building has to become more valuable.
Well, how does the building become more valuable? 5 years?
I do not know.
When they reassess.
Yeah, we'll reassess, but that's for 5 years away.
Or maybe 10, the way the reassessments will be going.
Can we appeal our assessment?
Trying to make it higher?
Ours isn't enough.
We think it's worth more. We'll be the first one.
Yeah. Mr. Walsh, would you be willing to represent the town against the town?
I'll do that, but our building's worth more.
All right, any other questions at this point?
Not to Ms. Holland, no.
All right. Are we ready to vote?
Yeah, I just want to say one thing before I vote.
Go.
I've tried to look at every school that was getting a big renovation before they did it, and I generally was not in favor of some portion, if not all, of some renovations along the way. Fairfield Woods had to be comparable to the other schools, even though I know they're never going to utilize that auditorium as much as they did, and I really didn't think they needed the extra gymnasium. But that was what the majority voted. They could have had separate but equal, maybe put a swimming pool there. That's something we don't have in town, instead of a third auditorium that we'll get excited about while it's still new, and then it'll sit dormant for a lot like the other ones do. But in this case, I went inside the classrooms, and it was not even the summer, and I can tell you, I was getting claustrophobic in the room, and you could barely breathe in the room. it was horrible. And this is truly not a project that it has anything to do with a want. This is absolute need. And I am going to support the entire thing because I feel that you need to have the leeway to get this project done, and I hope that every other board and commission does the same. Thank you.
Mr. Walsh, any comments before we vote?
Not right now.
Okay, there's not going to be a second chance.
Yes, there is.
Can I ask one more question?
Not tonight.
Can I see our agenda?
Sure.
Can I say one more thing?
Yep.
While I'm at it, I just want to thank the building committee who has, and the architects and everybody who's been involved in this project, because it's been so long, and the patience of the PTA and the school people. I just can't begin to tell you how long this has lasted and how many ups and downs. It's like a roller coaster ride, and I just want to commend you all and comment that there are also members of the TFC on this project. And so there are people with expertise, real expertise on this committee, and I think everybody listening at home needs to know that. Thank you.
All right. Any further comments?
Yeah, I'm going to make a modification.
Well, let me do one administrative point first.
Sure.
We did kind of jump into the discussion on this, I think, out of the anxiousness for moving this along, and I do want to confirm that I'd like a motion to accept the bonding resolution.
So moved.
Do I have a second? I'll second it. All right. I think Mr. Walsh, then back to you.
I'm going to make a motion to modify the bond resolution. To make a reduction in it, and I'm just trying to do the calculation now at this point in time. If you just hold on 1 second. To $3,636,395. Which is
Okay.
basically option 1 plus $94,613 for the THP energy recovery system. And while I understand that that will potentially put us near the threshold, I will ask bond counsel to draft language that may cover us in that regard. And I think that will save us $300,000 off the other option. And I understand that it's going to affect when some of the dates are.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Mr. Tetra, I would ask Mr. Walsh if you could, if you could just round it up to the next $5,000 level. That's normally what we deal with on these things.
You deal with it, so you're saying that, so take it up to 40?
3,640.
$3,640,000. $3,640,000.
Okay. I'll second that for discussion.
Obviously, I'm trying to save about $300,000 for an energy recovery system where the mean number on that is $126,000. So we're playing closer to what is market for that. I think the recovery under my schedule that I had prepared is about 3 years then on a cost recovery basis. I'm going to have a hard time supporting that extra $400,000. $400,000 on a cost recovery system that's really $126,000. The cost recovery, the energy recovery was always an ad alternate. This town committed to bond $2.2 million, and that went through all the town bodies. Now we're asking to go up, even with my number, by about $1,400,000 and change. This committee came back to us and went to the Board of Finance and gave estimates on what the additional costs that they were going to need within the last month of between $800,000 and $1.2 million. My number's still 1.4, and I'm trying to get it all done. I'm afraid if we go to the higher number, we're gonna have a heck of a time trying to get $1.3 million, $1,750,000 through other boards. It's just the realities of the world. So I would suggest that we try to consider a way to try to get everything we can. And if the energy recovery needs to be sacrificed along the way, it may need to be sacrificed. Because what we will have done then is give this school pretty much everything that they wanted. I mean, I know there's lots of other things they wanted, but at least they'll get the ventilation in the cafeteria, all-purpose / all-purpose room, and the gymnasium, and all the classrooms. It's not all the bells and whistles, but and it gets the security taken care of, and it gets the second lunch line. So I think the project will have to be micromanaged to see whether they end up ordering the energy recovery system. It's going to have to be, because we're going to have to somehow lock down that under no circumstances can this funding and in any way jeopardize the FEMA regulations. It's just going to have to be, and that's the way it's going to have to be. So that's the reason I'm doing it. I just have a hard time spending $400,000 on basically on an energy recovery system that's really the net cost when you purchase it off the shelf for this is $126,000. That's where I am.
Any other discussion from the board?
I think, I don't know, my impression is that 400,000 isn't a real number, that basically you're gonna go out to bid again, and until you go out to bid and know what you're actually getting, it's just using the numbers that we had for the second part. So I don't see it that way at all. I think this is giving them enough money to be able to get through the project. I think that the building committee has been really good about staying on top of the numbers, and I think they will continue with ideas on how to, make it be as cost efficient as possible. And, well, we have a project manager on it, I would presume. It's a building committee, right? There's a project manager somewhere involved in this. It's not, Dr. Title's not managing it or something, right? No offense to Dr. Title, I just can't joke. But I assume there's a project manager when they do. Somebody's gonna manage it? Architect, somebody's gonna manage it? I don't know who manages it. Since we just went through this, I would like to know that question.
Okay. Who would you like to address that question to?
Anybody who'd like to answer it in the room. If there's anybody at this table who knows the answer, fine, and if not, then who normally
To the chair of the building committee?
The architect has a great deal of input on that. There's also what's known as there's going to be a special inspector that's involved in this as well. The chair intends to remain the chair for as long as he can, and I'm just going to stay in tune with everything. I give you that assurance personally. But there is going to be supervision on professional staff. And by and large, the members of the committee are quite capable people, most of them.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I think, Ms. Stenick, to answer your unasked question or your unspecified question would also be that the well-known project I think you did mention not only ran without a construction manager, it ran without a building committee. By not having a building committee, that's normally our safety net. Building committee normally operates with a budget, which is what we're missing. It operates a little bit of an arm's length from the administration, which we're missing. So consequently, both those. The other thing about a building committee is the building committee meetings are in public. So there are monthly updates in public, and more than once sitting on the Board of Finance, I know our chair or other members of our committee have said, we saw in the paper and the news media, we heard from some parents that there was an issue with this project, can we get a project update? All those safety net features were missing in our most recent example. So I think that if you look at Penfield, that was a project about this size, about $3 million. It did have a building committee. It was managed very appropriately. There were some speed bumps on Penfield, but they were in public. They came back to various boards. We got updates. We kind of knew where they were. So I think that to some degree, your concerns are addressed by the process that we use, which is a very open public process with public updates, not something that happens behind closed doors.
Okay, just thought everybody should know that.
Any other discussion at the board about the amendment?
Can I just ask one question? This building committee handled the annex, correct?
Yes.
So you have some history with the property, correct?
Yes.
There was no problems when you guys did the annex, correct?
There was
Unforeseen problems on the property, no environmental stuff, no hidden vaults under the ground that you mentioned earlier.
no, but there was very limited foundation structure for those. Very, very limited.
And there's going to be a limited foundation?
No, you're going to have fully reinforced poured concrete foundations.
Okay, what was it on before? What are the
Masonry block.
Masonry block, okay. All right, that's my only question.
Okay. Then to the public, any public comment on the amendment and the amendment only, please? If you would come to the podium.
Kristen McCarthy-Vahey, RTM District 6, and I hope you do not support this amendment. It's cutting it too close. I actually toured this property a number of years ago with former Selectman Boley, and I agree that this project has been sorely needed in the amount of time that has gone on is too long. The realities of Fairfield are that we have two projects actually where digging has happened and we've had unforeseen circumstances, and the two that come to mind are Stratfield School and obviously the train station. This amendment cuts it too close. Please don't support it.
Any other comments from the public? All right, back to the board. Any further discussion? All right, right before we vote, I would like to add in that as I'm looking at this, you know, there've been a number of good points I think made during our discussion, and at some point you have to make a judgment as to where you think we are. I think as I look at the amendment, my concern is it does cut it too close on the FEMA risk. If we modify the resolution to this number, we're in essence locking ourselves in to 2 out of 3 bidders, and if they don't vet out, we don't have an option for the third, which means we would delay this going through the whole process again and lose at least a year as part of this. I think if we approve on the high side, we have the option of not spending as much as that. And hopefully we'll do that, and hopefully the contingencies will prove out. I also think when you get back and work the numbers, given we're going to bond this over 20 years, the differential between 364, 365, and 395 is $300,000 over 20 years, and I think that at the current interest rates becomes a relatively low number, and make sure we get this done. So with that said, all in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
One. All opposed? Okay, the amendment fails. We're back to the resolution. Any more discussion on the resolution?
Yeah, I make a modification to the bonding resolution to cut $400,000 off of it and to make it $3,545,000.
Okay. Is there a second? With no second, that dies. We're back to the motion before us. Any further discussion?
I think we're wasting a lot of money if we're going to vote for this full $395 to spend $400,000 on a cost recovery system that really is a $126,000 item. I can't say it any clearer than that. I support this project. I've supported everything all along, but you know, in this day and age, when we just did a bonding resolution for $750,000 and might net out to $550,000 of additional costs to keep adding and adding and adding to the taxpayer's burden in this environment is crazy. And that's all I can say about it. So I apologize that I won't be able to support that, but that's where it is.
I think it does come down to some point making a resolution as to whether you're willing to risk the FEMA limits and how far away. And I think what the building committee did is come to us with a resolution that kept the FEMA limits far away from what the project would be in the first year. I think it no question, we'd like to spend less. And I think that by narrowing it past the responsive bidders, we basically run the risk of having this project stop, wait a year more while it comes back, and we go through this whole process again. And I think, at some point, I think as Selectman Senek said, we've got to let the building committee manage this project and come in under the 3.9. And I believe they can do that. If there are no other comments, we ready to vote?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Aye. All right, the motion passes 2-1. All right, moving on to hear and act on any other communications. Jen, do we have any other communications?
May I say something about Mr. Wendt and Wiles and Mr. Jobs? Are they needed for the Board of Finance and RTM meetings?
We'll cover with them, that with them after, but thank you for the reminder. I would ask the building committee to cover that with our guests. Any other communications? I believe Ms. Stenick is handing out a Penfield Lighthouse.
Fundraiser on September 15th from 5:30 to 9 on Penfield and Million. Hors d'oeuvres, wine, beer, soda, and a great silent auction. And we're trying not to use public funds, so we're trying to get as many private people to come and support purchasing and renovating the lighthouse so it's stabilized.
Yeah, I would remind our guests here, the meeting is still in session, and if you would let us finish, that would be greatly appreciated. Any other communications? That being said, to hear and consider and act upon any other business that shall properly come before this meeting. I don't believe there is. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded? All in favor? Aye. It passes 2-0. Thank you all.